and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, folks, it is January 18th, 6 o'clock. This is the school board work.
If anyone knows about school choice, the legalities of top-off agreements, and how these things work in New Hampshire, it is certainly this panel of well-educated, accredited, and experienced gentlemen. I do hope that you all as school board members will attend the forum. And if you have differing opinions, and I know the town attorney has indicated that there are equity issues with top-off agreements and whether those will present a legal challenge to the town, this is a great place to have a robust debate on these issues. So I do hope that you all will be there. Press the questions that you have. You don't think certain things will fly as to school choice. This is definitely a place to have that discussion. And so I do hope that all of you will come and let's see, what comes of it. I have stated, as others have, that in a time of declining student enrollment in public schools, including Concord, we have a tremendous opportunity to negotiate the tuition rates with Concord without giving in on the 90% requirement. Maybe easy for me to say, right? Because I wasn't there negotiating. It's always, hey, it's easy to do. I didn't try to do it. I get that. And I certainly believe wholeheartly that you all are negotiating in good faith, doing the best that you can for the town of Deerfield and for the students in Deerfield. I would never say otherwise, but this, I think, is the time for school choice in Deerfield. We have not been told what Concord would offer as a tuition rate without the 90% requirement. Zach, you indicated at one meeting that it might be closer to the tuition rate of Co-Brown. At a recent MBC meeting, you indicated it might be 10 to 15% higher than what is in the current Concord contract. Since COVID, parents all over the country are choosing to educate their kids in places other than public schools. School choice is often viewed as anti-public school, but in this case, Deerfield does not have a public high school. We are not taking money away from our own high school. We don't have one. If ever there were a time and place for school choice, certainly it is now and in Deerfield. We as parents want to be able to choose where we send our kids to high school. We want to choose the school and environment in which we believe they will thrive. Education is not and should not be a one-size-fits-all model. Your movement towards competency-based education at DCS in some ways belies your belief in exactly that. You meet children where they are in that model. You give them the tools to succeed and you guide them on their journey. They will have differing needs, interests, and endeavors they want to pursue. Show them the respect they deserve and allow them to make those choices for themselves. Let them and their parents choose their high school. Errol Rhodes.
I don't know how much more you have, but
just one quick, if I can finish out. Errol indicated at the last meeting that school choice as it's being presented is a bit misleading. He indicated people do already have a choice as to where to send their kids. You only have a choice if you have money to pay for another school's tuition out of pocket while you're also paying for your school taxes to educate your kids in the Deerfield and Concord school systems. Not everybody has that luxury or ability. It has only ever been people with money that could choose their school because they could afford private schools. Without a high school in town, all families should have that choice. Let the money follow our children. Co-Brown is the overwhelmingly preferred high school amongst Deerfield residents. We should not have to pay out of pocket if we want to send our kids there, while we also pay to send them to Concord. School choice can take many forms, whether a few schools are selected and paid for or whether top-off agreements are preferred. We have options, but it all starts with voting down the 20-year Concord High School contract, Article 4 on the March ballot. Thank you.
Jeff and Kendra, is it possible for either you guys to scooch back just a little bit and maybe slide the table back just so I can't see you? There we go. A little bit up there.
Hi, Nancy Shoup, 50 Pleasant Hill Road. I saw a video on Facebook saying that no one has come forward to a meeting to support the contract. So I am here to say that I support the contract that with Concord High. And I base that on my own personal experience of two students going there, were two extremely different learners. One who struggled, very shy, The other, well, I'm not sure he was such an academic, but he had a great time at Concord and he did do well and is doing well as an adult. So I know there are others like me that support it. I've had many conversations with people that support it. I guess we just don't come forward, and maybe I guess we need to get people to come forward to let you know there are others out there that support it. I'm not supporting it because it's the cheaper option either. She was just commenting about we might have more effort to negotiate the cost. I believe the cost is lower, not because Concord is not as good a school as others, but because you were able to negotiate a lower cost. And I believe I was at a meeting where it said that our cost is going to be about the same as what Concord charges for their own student. I don't think we can negotiate lower than what Concord pays for their own students. Plus, I would think Concord having a larger tax base, I don't understand all this, so I hope I'm not saying something untrue, but being a city, I would think they have more resources to help offset taxes. So I would think that would be some of why they can be cheaper. I also saw a pie graph that was done of current parents that overwhelmingly support Co-Brown. And I guess I have a couple questions about that, although I know you can't answer them now. I'll have to get that other places. It said 200 people participated, so not 200 families. So if you have 200 people that participate and both parents fill it out the same, then you're really only kind of talking 100 families. Now I know that's being, but it's just 200 people is not necessarily 200 families. So I think that can kind of change the results a little bit. I also wonder if they have had students that are in high school or had siblings that were in. When my children, especially my daughter, was in, say, second grade, if I had thought of where she would go to high school, I was the mama bear that wanted her in a smaller school because she'd grown up in a small town and I wanted that for her. I had based it on what she was in second grade, a struggling, shy student. Well, by the time she hit 8th grade, she was a whole different child. And I think we have to watch our children grow because my mind was changed by the time that she hit that time. Real fast, I'll go at, when they talk about choice, I am not against choice if it's choice. That every child has the exact same opportunity to go to whatever school we have contracts with. If they're straight A's, if they're an athlete, if they're a spectator, if they're a computer geek, if they're in the band, as long as everyone has the same choice. If 35 kids want to go to Co-Brown, then Co-Brown needs to take all 35 kids. If Concord 35 want to go to Concord, Concord needs to take them. I'm not convinced that can happen. My own son, people will say he had choice. When I think back on it, he didn't have choice. He had Concord, which was a lottery. He had Co-Brown that he needed to apply to. And he had Bishop Brady that he applied to. So choice to me is that every kid gets to go where they want to go and no application needed. And I'm not convinced, and maybe you'll have the numbers that can convince me that every other school that we contract with or have agreements with can provide that. I am not opposed to choice. I want every child to have the same opportunity and not stand on that stage when they're an 8th grader and not know where they're going to go to high school.
Yep. Anybody else? Again?
Yes, I'm Bobby Ann from Brown Road. So I can kind of help you with that. That was the study that you saw that was a pie chart of all the people that wanted their children to go to Co-Brown. It was a study done by DCS.
Not to interrupt you, I probably should talk to you later because this is not
Yeah, comments are to us.
Okay. I appreciate everybody's point of view in the community. I do want to point out that certain people will say that they support a Concord High School only option. There are options that have not been given to this town that are available. So I hope that now I'm all like whacked up because I had this thing planned out. there are many options, and it is not like it used to be when there was 2 students that didn't have a place to go. Every high school in New Hampshire is needing of children, as well as we've been told by both Co-Brown and other schools that they will take 100% of our kids. So like, this is in the last 2 months, many people have spoken to all these high schools, and there won't be a student left out. The negotiations for application process have not been discussed yet, but there are ways for our children to not have stress for high school. And I hope that people watching this at home know that choice does not mean we don't support Concord. We support choice, and there are ways to get choice. So thank you for your time.
Anything else? One more.
Greg Whitmore, North Road. Could you, off the top of your heads, you know what the current cost per student is?
For Concord,
No, for DCS.
I have it in my truck. I can run out and get it after if you really want to know, but I have a cost in my truck.
Okay, I just have it from a few years ago at 19,105.
Well, I know we're below the state average right now.
Okay.
I just can't remember.
I think it was 2021 was 19,105. So I guess the question I have is, we don't bat an eye at spending, 19, 20,000, whatever the current cost might be, to go K through 8. And why does it become a bone of contention when we send them to high school? So, if we're looking at other schools that have, for example, Co-Brown has cost right around 19. Why does it suddenly become an issue when we go from 8th grade to 9th grade and suddenly we all become so concerned about cost when we've been paying that all along? Seems a bit odd to me. Could you tell me, do we just send one bus to Concord?
2.
We sent 2 buses to Concord? Okay. And has that been the case for the last few years, or is that unique to this year?
It's always been at least 2.
It's always been at least 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
This to the, as long as my recollection goes back.
Okay, so we're
Three-
currently paying
three
for,
at times.
so we are paying for 2 buses this year, and that's been pretty much the standard for a while. Okay, excellent.
We would send another one if we had it.
Okay. So there is money in the budget, you're saying, potentially if we needed another bus? Or could another bus, is another bus budgeted for and the money's not being spent?
Yeah, this busing conversation's a whole different thing.
I know, I'm just curious, so,
It's, yeah, it's conversation general. We budget for 3 high school buses.
excellent. Has there been a vote taken on which school board members support Article 4?
It was unanimous.
It was unanimous? Okay, because that has not been posted attached to the article in its current draft, but it will show up.
This is the meeting minutes from when we moved the article.
Yes.
Contract reflecting unanimous.
Okay, so all 5 current members support Article 4, correct?
5 sitting members.
Sorry, 5, yeah, okay.
You mind if I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So obviously cost is a big thing on your mind here. So, and I respect the amount of time you've put into looking at high school options.
Mhm.
I assume you considered what the cost might be to the community if we were to go this choice model?
Absolutely.
And what do you think that cost is at?
So I'm going off of the cost that you provided, which is $1 per 1,000.
So what would the annual impact of the school budget be?
The annual impact for the school budget?
Yeah.
I have not calculated it. I'm going off of what it would cost to the individual taxpayers at $1 per 1,000. But if you're trying to catch me up on something, I mean.
No, I mean, it seems like it's a pretty substantial concern of yours. And I think that maybe you look at what the impact of the town would be.
Yeah, and I'm using the numbers provided by the presentation on the school contract.
You're the one that wrote the warrant article though, so I would have
Yes.
thought that.
Yes,
Maybe you would have looked at what the cost of the community would be.
but I'm the one, this is my floor right now, and you're,
Sorry, you were
Coming at
asking us
me.
questions. So.
no, but you're coming at me with a
question?
warrant article that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. It's kind of an odd choice of discussion.
Oh, I thought we were talking about high school choice.
No, I didn't mention high school choice at all, actually.
Okay.
I'm just asking pointed questions here.
Let's wrap it up, guys.
Yeah, can I have my time back that I just lost? Thank you.
Wrap it up.
So there was discussion to send out a mailer what would be the contents of this mailer?
Stick around for the rest of the meeting. We'll probably talk about it later
Well, it was talked about that. All right.
on.
Just to wrap it up, I talked with a lot of people in the last 3 weeks or so, and a woman last night I talked to said that if Article 4 passes in March, they're moving to the seacoast. I spoke to a man a few weeks ago who said if Article 4 passes, he's moving his family to his rental property in Pembroke and sending them to PA. So this is going to have a huge ripple effect through the town. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Seeing none? All right, here we go. Next up, we have on the agenda, we have agenda review. I am going to, before we get into the math and data presentations, I am going to allow Chris to come up to the table real quick. He's got a couple facilities updates for us.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just a
Welcome,
quick
Chris.
update. Just a quick update on the roofing project. Took a little more time than I expected to get the official RFP out.
Okay,
Amber helped me with that. That's going out the door tomorrow. I did make some changes and some adds to it.
Okay.
We're holding off on replacing the vinyl siding for now. I'm getting an alternative price from
that's on the
the
gable ends.
gable ends.
Okay.
The contractors weren't really too hyped about having to do that. I understand that they're roofers. I do have another contract coming in just to give you preliminary numbers so we can look at the total project. I took a couple core samples, 2 layers of 1/2-inch plywood. That's in pretty good condition. So, you know, it's not critical. There's no leaks. So it could be deferred if we wanted to. Replacing additional 14 roof drains that are on the roof, 30 years old, one of them leaks. If we're going that far, let's do it all. Adding a line for the alternate for the 90 mil rubber roof with the 30-year warranty.
That doesn't apply to you, Chris.
Yeah. A separate line for the cover board for the solar panels. Is this going to be a separate
Okay.
line? That way we know exactly
That
what
cost.
the cost is if we decide to go another route or we're
Okay.
including it. So
And
that's
that's
all.
in the street tomorrow?
What's that?
Hitting the street tomorrow, you said?
It's the streets tomorrow and the website and the newspaper. And
You know how long that'll be out on the streets for?
bids are due February 1. Roughly 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks. And I've already have 4 contractors already looked
Ready to
at the
bid it.
work.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
So we're looking good.
Jeff?
The only thing I would say is on the vinyl siding replacement, we're just gonna wanna make sure that if we do that work, we do it before the roof is done, just because we're gonna want to flash up.
Roofers didn't seem to have a concern about doing it after.
Does the wall meet? Okay,
I haven't looked at that far, but I think because of the 2 layers of 5/8 board, it actually furs out the wall and they can just run it right up underneath. Kind of like a drip edge, I guess, maybe, but I can look at it more closely. And
I
make
think if we're gonna
decisions on
run
that.
the route,
What's that?
if we're gonna do that as a separate small project, I think to Jeff's extent, let's get it done and have people on the roof and they're gonna be up there anyway.
Okay,
Let's do it before the roof gets done. So
Okay.
if you wanna, because the roof wouldn't be scheduled until June
15,
15th, plus or minus a couple of
plus
days.
or minus.
So that seems like a small enough project. We might be able to sneak it in
Okay.
there on one of the vacation weeks maybe. If
Sure.
we get the vinyl siding. Okay,
Great, then, that's all.
that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Nice and quick.
Good work. Thank you very much
Pleasure.
for your efforts. Awesome.
Did you want to talk about the cleaning?
Oh.
And-
Got to hear principal with the economy. I am actually.
Hey, Chris, nice to see you. How you been?
Yeah, hi. Citywide Facility Solutions, which is a contracting cleaning company. I met with a person, the rep, on Tuesday,
Lost it.
to go over the classrooms that I need assistance in, that I'm covering.
Okay.
And I'm meeting with him again on Friday to get pricing from him.
So is this cleaning for, like deep cleaning for vacation weeks? or is this-
Nighttime cleaning.
This is night cleaning?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is to subcontract it because we haven't been able to get enough.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, we've had applications, but they either bow out or become a no-call, no-show. So
Okay. Come up with a plan and let us know what it is.
I will. That's it? Very good.
You're dismissed.
Thank you.
All right, in agenda review, I didn't ask any of the other board members if they had anything else. I did add item C, which is that Concord contract discussion. Anybody else have anything they want to add?
What is that information on the
Okay.
Are we gonna discuss more articles at all?
Do we want to discuss warrant articles? I mean, we've already approved and sent to the NBC. The only ones to discuss, but what do you want to discuss?
The petition warrant article for high school choice, and if we can talk about cost of that, just save it for deliberative.
You want to get into that? We can have a
We
conversation.
can't really, you can have a conversation under the high school, but you can't do anything with petition.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's just, okay.
The next
So-
meeting, we're talking with the moderator. Is there
yes.
any sense to wait until next meeting with the moderator?
The moderator is more going to be in regards to who's presenting what articles.
High school contract, we're gonna talk about the mailers and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Let's just have a big high school conversation. Item C. We don't have a non-public tonight. Okay. All right. And we'll have another round of public comments later on. So that brings us to the math presentation, separate from the data presentation. So who wants to join us from the math presentation end of the room?
Actually, the data presentation folks are also kind of part of the whole.
Is this just gonna be one big thing?
One big happy
All right,
family.
Principal
here, so
It's your circus.
You
Let's
guys
go.
want to come on up a little closer and,
Do you want to be closer?
no, that's gonna be. You can sit wherever you want, bring up a table.
Bring up a chair, pull up a table, come join us.
Seat over here, seat over here, you can move this seat if you want.
Like, turn my back to Wish you're gonna get my back.
Come on, no, there's a three here, yeah. Dragon you go. Oh, I can have wheels. Well, that's it. I can't fight with that one. So many times.
You deserve a seat at the table.
So make sure I get all of your best sides. All right.
Do you want to do a very brief introduction?
Yes, I
I
will.
believe we all know everybody, but let's just make sure we all know everybody.
I don't know one, so.
Kendra doesn't know anybody.
I'm Kendra. Kendra Code, nice to meet you all.
Do you want?
Oh, good. Kelly.
I think you know most of the people here.
I'm Zach Langlois.
All right, we'll start with you, Jose.
I'm Jose Luciano. I am the 8th grade math teacher here at DCS.
My name is Samantha Corwin, and I am the 4 through 8 math specialist here at DCS.
Jamie Audley and the kindergarten through 3rd grade math specialist.
Next instrument is 7th through 8th grade.
The whole team is here.
Everybody's here. Love it. All right. What do you got for us?
So a few weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, one of the recent board meetings, I was not here, but Brian relayed back that you would like to have a presentation from the math, middle school math regarding a pilot that we have begun. They attended the last CRB meeting. We reported out some minutes from that meeting and things that we discussed. But I guess I'd like to bring you back to kind of give an overview of the math story here at DCS. So a few years back, I've been here for 5 years. My first year here, the year prior to that, the math specialists in the school at the time decided to do a math pilot. They piloted Eureka, Envisions, and Investigation, which was the program that was currently being used. And they did a whole year-long, well, they piloted at the end of the one school year and then brought it in for a full pilot the following year. And at the end of that year, compared the data, and the decision was to move forward with Eureka for our K-5 classrooms and students. From there, the plan was to move it up into the middle school and so have a school-wide K-8 Eureka Math program being used at DCS. In conjunction with that, the entire SAU did pivot to Eureka as well. And so the SAU is using Eureka, and Concord High School, our school of record, also uses Eureka. So once we got through the first year, I believe the following year, the sixth grade, started to do some of the Eureka math and worked closely with the math specialist, but was not 100% sold on the Eureka math program at the middle school level. Worked really hard to try to implement it with fidelity. And then I don't want to bring up any kind of traumatic event and have any kind of PTSD moment, but then 2020 happened. And March of 2020, we, as you know, we're all in shutdown. So Eureka became a even bigger challenge to the K-5 level. It wasn't. So this conversation is strictly 6 through 8 in terms of where we're at. So coming back the following year, the math team really felt strongly that Eureka was not presented as such that it was going to be a middle school. They hadn't really been involved in the conversation. They were having a hard time implementing a lot of the Eureka program with fidelity. We started to have a couple of conversations, and in I guess it was June of 2021, we had a pretty strong meeting, and where the middle school math team made it very clear that it's really not working at DCS, and we need to do something different. They had spent all of last year going to Carolyn Worcester's cohort, which was once a month. The entire middle school math team, plus the math specialists, participated in this cohort with Carolyn Worcester to learn about mathematical practices and implement it with Eureka. And from that, even Carolyn Worcester was not a supporter of the Eureka program. And so with that, our math team started to look at other programs that might be better for the middle school. And at the beginning of this year, we decided that we were going to start moving in a different direction than Eureka. And so the process began. It was kind of we pieced the process together as best we could. But I feel we've taken some strong steps to formalize this process. The middle school math team and the math specialists met with the math curriculum committee. Many of those members were part of the development of the math curriculum last year, or the update of the curriculum last year. And many of them have been part of the process of bringing Eureka on board for K-5. So they listened to what the middle school team and math specialists had to say. And basically, for the most part, the general conversation around Eureka at the middle school level is that at least 70-75% of the Eureka program is being supplemented already with other things. And as good math teachers that know how that's all they do, that's like their specialty, obviously, they felt like they were pulling materials from all over to supplement what Eureka was lacking. So they basically shared with the math committee the challenges that they had been having with the Eureka program. And from that meeting, all kinds of notes about that, we decided to move forward, have the math team move forward to present into the CRB, the curriculum review. So that was in October. The math team presented pretty much the same information to that team as well. As you know, Brooke Petroselli is the head of our CRB, and we basically decided from that point, based on the information that they shared regarding the amount of supplementing they had to do, and things like it not meeting the algebra needs of our students in Eureka, being heavy in the language content area, assuming a lot of previously learned skills, things that just were not working with Eureka. We decided to give the CRB, which consists of a teacher from every single grade level, a school board member at the time was not present, but not because Nate took over for the next meeting, and decided to move forward with the pilot. Nick had done a lot of research on big ideas. So Brooke put together a pilot kind of a process that we needed to go through. There's a huge technology component to big ideas. So Brooke was the point person to reach out to make sure that this technology, first of all, aligned with what we had here at DCS and in the state of New Hampshire, making sure that it was an acceptable, we had acceptable use. So Brooke contacted Big Ideas, and then the process took off from there. So our middle school team has, it's been quite a process trying to get the materials and that type of thing. They've recently had a meeting with somebody from Big Ideas to go through the technology piece. Have you gotten the textbooks yet? I'm sorry, I should have asked you.
No, we've not gotten a paper copy of the textbook yet, physical copy, but we do have the online access.
Digital
So they give us digital access to all
They
this.
should be here this week.
Right.
We've been,
Perfect.
we've been told. So.
All right. So from that point, Nick and the team started working on getting some numbers together of what this would cost if we were to, never mind just piloting the program, because they give you a very steep discount when you want to pilot something, but then looked at the cost if we were to bring it on for all of our students, grades 6, 7, and 8. Jamie and Samantha and I met to talk about a rubric that to put in place, and then we met with the math team, looking at things that we're looking for essential environment, essential actions, essential understandings. So as they're going through the math pilot program with Big Ideas, these are the things that they're looking for to make sure that they meet expectations of what we're looking for. Is very similar to the process that that the teams went through with bringing Eureka on board. In December, our 2 math specialists, Jamie and Samantha, went to Concord High School. Nate referenced that visit, that they did visit Concord High School as our sending our school of choice and or our school of record, I should say. They visited the math because when you go on their website, it says Eureka. So they went to, just to meet and visit, and they attended 8 classes, 9 different math classes at the time, took away lots of notes. So I'm sure they can speak to that, especially if you have any questions about that. But they will tell you that they found 9 different ways of teaching math. There was lots of different ways it was happening. Some people were implementing as much Eureka as they could. Some people were piloting or incorporating some of open up resources. Some were, was anybody doing Big Ideas? So that was the middle school. One person was doing that. And I think Mr. Oxnard spoke to, the packets that the Concord High School provide for his daughter in the math class, and our 2 math specialists did bring back a sample of what that packet does look like, so they can speak to what Concord is doing. They are also supplementing the Eureka program at Concord High School and Concord Middle School. So on December 19th, we had another CRB meeting. Nate had presented a list of questions that he wanted to have answered. So he came to the CRB meeting. The math committee, the math team, I should say, did a wonderful job answering all of his questions. And then I think that's it. That leads us to current day. So I have invited Nick and Rod and Jose to answer any questions that you might have. Samantha has been working very closely as the math specialist for 4 through 8 with our middle school team. She actually teaches a 7th grade math class, and Nick teaches an 8th grade algebra class. So she has firsthand knowledge of some of the resources that are being used, and has been a wonderful support for our team teachers as well as our students. So if you have no questions for me, I will turn it over to our team, and you can ask your questions. They will be willing to answer.
Depends what they have.
You can defer.
So I would say to start off, is there any information you guys want to share with us, experiences, what your thoughts are, before we start with the questions off? Or?
Talk to, I've been using it for a couple months or so now, and love it. It's more accessible for the kids. If I assign text assignments, kids can get the assignments. So there's like an accessibility piece to it that's really great. That isn't there with the Eureka program. just the way it's presented is more engaging for teachers and kids. So I love it so far.
How are we gonna benchmark the performance of the students who
I think that,
Eureka versus?
yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think that's a huge challenge, right? Because you're talking a group of students that have gone through the last few years of chaos, right, when it comes to education. So the challenge there, and I think part of it is some of it's not measurable. Like you got to look at it from the perspective of like, you could, I thought about doing it from a different perspective. It's not necessarily a database because there's really no starting point when this happened because we haven't really been able to implement Eureka as effectively as we tried. And initially it wasn't effective, and then we went to COVID, it got less ineffective. So it's really hard to make that choice in the middle school what's going on. I do know that the morale is a huge piece of it, right? When it comes to students seeing the Eureka program and how it's laid out is a huge morale, like demoralizing essentially, right? Because it's so language heavy. When you get into big ideas, there's a piece of it that is like, it seems like what Rod was saying is that students seem much more engaged and interested. I've been using it a little bit more in 7th grade with Samantha, and there's way more engagement into what they're doing. And the problems that they're being faced with are more in line with challenging them, not verbal, say with words, but challenging them with real life problem solving along the way. So I thought about doing it from a perspective, again, down the road as like a survey as to what students are feeling based on what they're learning. Obviously, you hope for growth, but it's how do you benchmark growth when you don't have necessarily, unless we start now and benchmark later, but that would take time. You know, we can do that, but it's really not going to be a data-driven piece of information. Sometimes I have to go with experience. I've been teaching 23 years, and I've gone through 6 different programs, and so far what I'm seeing from this program is probably the best options for students with the technology piece of it, the resources and paper copy, the challenging, the math practices, everything's in there for this program. Obviously, you don't teach that program with fidelity, but you have to always supplement along the way. But there'll be less of that and more ability to supplement some of those really cool opportunities like hands-on learning along the way that we don't get the opportunity with Eureka as much.
Curveball with benchmark testing as well would be to compare what the benchmarks were for middle school using Eureka to say using big ideas is, I would say, with pretty strong confidence that we haven't used Eureka with 100% fidelity, so there's no benchmark for just using Eureka. Whereas, well, to be honest, we're math teachers, so we probably wouldn't use any program with 100% fidelity because why would you pay us to be specialists as a math teacher if we were to do that, right? You know, it's a skeleton, it's a foundation for what we're doing, which is compare-ish, but we're never going to get the solid data to compare before and after to it. Just doesn't, it won't happen, can't happen.
I know one of the suggestions at CRB from Kristen Davis was to look at some of the SAS interim assessments, like those. So that is something that we could use as a point of data, is to use some of those practice tests from SAS. And that could give us some information as well if we started those now.
I guess I would wonder what that would be different than, say, we use this. We already, how much standard tests? We already used star data.
So we have star data as well.
Well, of course, right, because the star test is pretty quick.
Right.
That's a couple hours, hour.
It's under, she should be under under 45 minutes, half hour. That.
Okay, so that's an hour long.
It's a class.
Done 3 times a year.
So we would have done it early in the year.
Right, we've had 2.
We've had 2 rounds already. So really a telling point may be to look at what the first 2 rounds ended us. Right?
Yeah, I mean,
and we can do some monitors with that as well.
Right.
Like we could do these are just our benchmarking periods, but you can always monitor. So we could do another time in between there also, because I feel like if we really want to see that before we do that.
I mean, I know it's a standardized test and nobody likes the word standardized test, but at the end of the day, if it's an hour-long test, it's still subject matter based. It's not.
Sure.
right?
I mean, I think we can use that data. I just hope we don't use it so with fidelity, because there's a lot of components to where that data came from, right? So to start the year, this year, we were not teaching Eureka, right? So we were kind of piecemealing a lot of stuff together coming out of COVID, trying to balance that out, making sure the kids are getting the skills they need. So we've got to look at that data kind of we're hoping to see growth. That's what we want to see is growth. So I wouldn't want to say that it's because of big ideas that we got the growth, or it's because of Eureka that we didn't get the growth. Like, I want to make sure we look at that data as growth in that state, but I don't want to I don't feel like we should base it based on the program we chose, if that makes sense.
Is there or is there an option to survey the students to see what they like?
That was my thought initially, is to survey them and find out what their feelings are, because part of it, we are working with humans, right? These aren't robots. If they were, our job would be a lot easier, but and less fun. So part of it is, you look at it from the perspective, it'd be nice to know what they're feeling, right? Because I know in my experience in the last 4 or 5 years that we've put Eureka in place in the middle school, because middle school is very different. The program is very different than elementary. So they're completely different programs. We were thinking initially that they'd be the same, but when they got to middle school, they was like, oh, and they were completely dejected by what they saw. And since I've been opening up this big ideas thing, has changed a lot. So I'm seeing more buy-in from the students just in the last month or so of putting some of this stuff in place along the way. Like, that would be a way to look at some data to kind of see what they're feeling, what they're thinking along the way. That could be another way to approach it, along with STAR or SAS testing. So,
As a non-math person, I think it seems to me like it would be very important that the kids like it and want to engage with it. They did not like math or want to engage with it, so the more that we can get students to enjoy it, I think is important.
I also feel that with big ideas, this is an experience I haven't had in quite a long time from a student. I shared a section of big ideas and I put it on Google Classroom, and it has examples and problem sets and things students can look at as sample problems of how to solve. And the student came to me the other day who struggles in math and said to me, Mr. Sain, I worked with my dad last night on big ideas. We solved this problem together. And that's the first time that conversation's come up since I've implemented Eureka along the way. Now I'm in big ideas, and students are able to engage with parents in some of the conversations of math. Because there are examples given, there are problem sets that show how to solve stuff where kids have more access to resources for the strugglers that Eureka does not offer. There's very little resources that Eureka offers, if any at all, that helps struggling students with that. So that's the piece that I say I took away from right away. I was like, we're doing something right now by having this program in place, because it's just one kid right there already made a difference in itself. I thought that was cool to see big ideas that way, because I haven't seen that in a long time.
One of the things we talked about at the CRB meeting was that I remember my 7th and 8th grade pre-algebra, algebra as being a lot of sort of sitting and taking notes, then taking a test, then taking notes, then taking a test. And that was sort of my math memory from middle school. And I didn't like it all that much.
No. I don't think you're supposed to do that.
Right. And so I think that in light of that, part of the decision by Eureka was that it was more of these kind of real world, embedding the math into why are we doing this? How is it relevant? How are we? And as you talk more about big ideas, it does sound like I'm hearing more of that, but I want to make sure that as we look into this and make this next decision, is that moving ahead? Are we moving towards, not moving back to my 7th grade nightmares, but moving towards math in the real world, doing projects, seeing how math is actually pretty cool when you is that a piece of this program rather than moving back to what I remember pre-algebra and algebra being?
And I think you and I we had this conversation at CRB as well. And I feel like as I'm diving more into big ideas, I feel like Eureka is the opposite of what you're thinking it is. It was not that real life data stuff or that real world situations. It was actually the opposite of that. And there was very little skill building into it. So you got to have that skill to build on. And I feel like Eureka just assumed all that. And Mrs. Withy mentioned that earlier. Eureka did that, a lot of assumption of they already knew this skill, so they're going to be able to do this problem. And it's real world, but it's not really real world. It's it's tough. So it's very disconnected, I should say. with big ideas, for example, like I'm working on right now, we're working on surface area of cylinders. And it's right away, it's like this simple thing where the little project that we're gonna do, and I was just talking to Mrs. Corrin about it today, is Big Ideas has like this idea of taking like a vegetable can and now using it to measure and draw it out on paper and then roll it out as the rectangle. So yeah, it's applied. Would you really ever do that in real life? No, but it's at least applying the knowledge of surface area with a cylinder.
I do that all the time. Like at least twice a week.
Yeah. So so it does offer a lot of that. So yeah, that middle school nightmare that you're having is real. I had it too, and you know what I think. I mentioned you in CRB as well. Right now, we're kind of in that little nightmare right now because we're really trying hard. I know I am to really prepare these kids skill-wise for high school because we're really in 7th grade. They're in 8th. They're going to go to 8th grade next year. They're going to need a lot of skill that they missed along the way in the last few years. So I am piecemealing that. Ideally, what I'd like to get into when we get into Big Ideas, or if we go to a new program, hopefully we do, and it's Big Ideas, but we get into the situation where you're right, we're doing more hands-on stuff. We're using the program as a skeleton, utilizing this technology piece because it's huge, but also bringing all those projects in along the way to show that real-world hands-on stuff.
So yeah, my thought on what you're describing is, I honestly don't believe any single program is going to pull the pieces that you want. But that's what a professional math teacher should be doing, is pulling in these real life situations and presenting problems that the kids want to engage with and tackle. And I don't think that's going to come from Eureka or Big Ideas. Those, like Nick was describing, skeletons, but it's really going to come from the teachers given the time and development to chances for professional development to create and research and find these engaging projects. That's a separate thing than this Big Ideas program or Eureka program or Pearson or any other program we can have. It's really, what are you looking for from a professional math teacher? That's what I see.
I'm not qualified to analyze programs or anything like that. The one question I have that I heard, and I would ask you guys is, so Nick, it sounds like every 4 years, right? You said 23 years teaching in 6 programs.
A couple different schools, so they change.
Okay. Yeah. So the question I have is, what level of confidence do you have that 4 years from now, we're not going to be having this conversation again? Have you?
We guys are not going to be having this conversation.
I hopefully I don't either. No.
I'm going to guess 8 years from now we might, because things age out.
Sure.
But yeah.
But have you guys gotten feedback from other users, districts all over the country? What kind of, aside from your personal experiences,
do
you have any comfort in that this has been well received in other districts?
Yeah, I can go back to kind of talk about the change in program, and then we'll go. I think Samantha can add a little bit to that because she worked with it in Bedford, New Hampshire.
Okay.
But see, I think the challenge is we jumped into Eureka as a middle school without us working together to make that happen. I have to say that I personally, initially, when we looked at Eureka, I was extremely apprehensive with going into middle school Eureka as a teacher, right from the beginning. I saw the challenges when I saw the book and looking through it, my experience. With Big Ideas, I see it offers, obviously it's tough to say we're going to get 10 years out of a skeleton of a program because in the technology world we live in, things change so fast, right? And even word problems themselves, and data plans on a phone and a word problem has changed from before when you had a text plan and this plan, now it's all in one. So that's always going to be the struggle of us coming up with problems to engage kids in the modern world, right? Yeah. But I feel that in my experience with that is this book has all the stuff we're looking for in a program as a teacher. It offers that skeleton base for families to have access to stuff. So I feel confident personally that it's a pretty solid program. And there's a lot of data that drives that. Like there's a lot of schools that use these programs. It's been around for quite a few years. Actually, I think it was like 8 years ago, I went to the national NCTM and I went to a Big Ideas conference and I was sold on it then. And to try to get it in, it was tough, right? We were really Eureka driven 4 or 5 years ago and we had this mindset that we were going with Eureka. So I felt though I was confident then and it's still around now and I wanted it then and I still see it now as valuable. So that's my personal take on it. But I know that Samantha has some experience with it teaching in Bedford, right?
Yes, correct. So I would say that my first like real job coming out of graduating from college was working at Bedford as a long-term sub for half of the year. And I jumped right into it, right into a 6th grade math classroom. And I had very little preparation. I like got the job on Thursday and started on Friday. It was amazing. But I would say that Big Ideas is really intuitive. It wasn't something that took a lot of like a learning curve or anything to get used to. The students, I started at the beginning of the year with them. And so it was something that they were able to jump in along with me as a brand new teacher as well. And it seemed that it was one of those things that the teachers at that school held to really high esteem. It was something that they used. We obviously don't use everything with like perfect fidelity, but it was something that required little supplementation because a lot of the things that they needed were already built into the program. And so being a first year teacher, brand new, starting on Thursday, or getting hired Thursday, starting on Friday, it wasn't something that was super challenging to me. And I know that and of course we would never want this, but if any of our amazing math teachers were to leave or move or go on to other things in life, that this is a program that a new teacher could step into and not necessarily have a lot of challenge with. And we love Eureka at the K-5 level. It's not the easiest thing to step into because I also stepped right into that one for the second half of the year. I started using Eureka and I was like, whoa, a little different there. But it is something that if we ever did need to have a new middle school teacher or an additional middle school teacher, that I feel confident that they would be able to kind of dive right into and not necessarily feel any struggle or any pushback in order to kind of like implement what they have going on.
Maybe you're sort of speaking to this, but do we have any concerns that like K-5 is using Eureka and then there would be a shift in 6th grade? Like, is there a concern there?
I don't find much concern in that regard because they are both Common Core programs. So the language is very similar because it's Common Core language. The tape diagrams or any of the visual representations are very similar because it's something that a lot of Common Core companies and programs have just started implementing. So I wouldn't find too much concern there as well. And Miss Adley and I did go to visit Concord High School where there was some concern of like, oh, the kids are going to go from Eureka to Big Ideas back to Eureka. But as Ms. Withy said as well, it was kind of a hodgepodge of all kinds of things just because there's a lot of independence for the teachers at the high school level for them to implement what feels right for their teaching styles. But we saw some open up, we saw some Eureka, we saw some teachers creating brand new stuff just on their own. We saw some people using Big Ideas. There's one classroom. And so we didn't feel that there was a great concern of like getting kids prepared with one program when, oh no, they're going back to that one because that wasn't something we were seeing when we were there. And of course, we only saw a snapshot of the day, but it feels that if that is a program that they do claim to be using with some fidelity, any day you walk into that classroom, you should be able to see some of that going on. And the day we were there, we did not. So at least not to a great extent.
Well,
I
and they
should say.
don't really claim to be doing it with fidelity anymore. They are looking at Open Up as, I guess, a shell for their program there. So Eureka is not really what they, I guess, claim they are, but they are making a shift.
And what, go ahead.
So is that at the middle school as well, Rhonda? Or is that just the high
I
school?
believe so, because I think there it was an 8th grade class that was piloting Open Up in conjunction with what they were doing at the high school.
And the piece I was thinking about too is I taught 6th grade for quite a few years here prior to going to 7th grade about 2-3 years ago. Is I think when you're getting to a K-8 school and you have students using the exact same book for 8 years, there's like no shift in like their thinking. So you get 5 years out of a program that we value in the school, and now there's that shift for students. They get almost refreshed by like, hey, there's something new I'm doing. It's a different book, it's a different program, different visual appealing, whatever it is. There's more technology involved that Eureka doesn't have. That's that shift, like naturally shifts them into a middle school and gives them that whole second like sort of, I guess another wind, right? They're trying to get through. Because I think K-8 can be a long time for some kids in the school, and I feel that change is also helpful. In with Common Core the way it is. I mean, prior to 10 years ago or 8 years ago when we were doing this, it was that concern that which books are meeting Common Core and which books are not. And now that's not the case. Everything is Common Core based. The language is all the same. The diagrams are all very similar. So not much of a shift there.
So the rubric that we created was to kind of help that too, to make sure, because these are the programs we're using, but they're not our curriculum. So we're making sure that any program we choose aligns with our curriculum. So we created these rubrics to make sure that anything we choose is going to align with what DCS sees as what our students should do for math.
And we have competencies are based on our curriculum. Program.
Right, they're based on the curriculum.
Based on the
Which are also based on Common Core, which all these programs are as well, so.
Yeah, sorry.
Just one quick question for the layman amongst us. Could you guys go into real quick, yeah, the nuances between, because it sounds kind of confusing and scary, right? Like, oh, we're making this shift. Concord's doing Eureka with, supplementing with X, Y, or Z, and it almost sounds, or our middle school supplementing with. So can you explain how, it could sound like a deficiency to someone that's like, oh. So can you just real quick kind of summarize if that question makes sense to you?
Yeah, I don't know.
What?
I'm not sure what your question is.
No, so you talk about the skeleton, right?
Right.
Framework.
Right.
So here's the way to think of it, if I may interject.
I ask you something, right?
Well,
Go.
No, go ahead, go.
So you talk about the skeleton, the
Right.
framework of Eureka versus big ideas.
Yeah.
So you're going to teach, let's just say geometry, right?
Sure.
I'm going to learn how to find the volume of a cylinder.
Right.
If we have Eureka or we have big ideas,
Yeah.
presumably if that's in our curriculum, I'm going to learn that. So what is the difference that we're making in the change, switching from big ideas?
Okay, so with Eureka, like Eureka is very, so just in the program itself, let's go back, the program itself, so Eureka is a consumable program. So when you use the book, if you buy the books, you write in it, the book's done, it's tossed, like it's over. So there's, I think, 6 or 7 books in 7th grade, I'm not sure how many there are, that we purchase in. Those books are like, there's like story behind the books. It's called The Story of Ratios and Rates, and it's very disconnected. So they're supposed to say everything in the 7th grade is about ratios and rates. So everything you do is about ratios and rates along the way, and it's very disconnected. You'll like start with book 1, you do some geometry in book 1, and then you go away from it in book 2. Now you're doing algebra, then you come back to book 3, and they randomly throw in cylinders in solving that stuff, and it's usually embedded in some sort of word problem. So there's no like skill coming out of it. It's always embedded in the word with Eureka. With big ideas, they have like with the skeleton gives you almost like a sequence of like more, as I say, user function sequence where you can follow through the chapters the best possible. Sometimes you skip around. But in those chapters, there's examples of how to solve things. There's practice problems. There's a technology component in big ideas that offers those video sessions. There's video sessions involved that kids can, hey, I can post a video session on Google that will show you how to solve a problem. So when you go home at night, you can look at it. That's not in Eureka at all. As far as solving them goes, you're going to solve them all the same way. Like a cylinder is a cylinder, but the way you get there is a little different. There's like the skill, there's the application, there's the videos that's in big ideas that's not in Eureka. There's extra practice for students who struggle. There's differentiated instruction. There is enrichment where you can take some kids that needed a challenge. You can push them into like an open-ended problem of enrichment that is not in Eureka as well. So there's a lot of different components that Big Ideas offers that Eureka does. I don't know if that answers your question, but there's so much more to it. And I didn't even know, when I first thought about Big Ideas, I just was really interested in the paper copy. Once we had the meeting the other day with the company, they have such a huge digital component. I was like, this is amazing that they have this paper copy, but then they can do everything digitally along the way for students who want to access that. Not that I want to plug them in all digitally, because I think students are plugged in a lot more than they should be.
Disconnected sometimes.
Right, but I think you have,
get my son disconnected, I appreciate
you have both, right? And this gives that option. So Big Ideas just offers so much more. I mean, there is a cost associated with it. It offers more because it costs more. Like, that's a fact. But your Eureka is basically a free program that you can grab off the internet and use PDF forms of in Microsoft Doc, and you can do those things with. Well, it's free. It's a free program. So if we don't want to purchase the books, we can go online and find them. you get what you get. Like you're getting a whole different approach.
Can I try to paraphrase what I think I heard you say?
Sure, go for it.
So Eureka is structured in such a way that it's the theme going through a book, you said, is like ratios. And so it pulls from some algebra, some geometry, some different kind of what we would call disciplines to look at ratios in different ways and sort of apply them and see how it kind of shows up in our daily existence maybe every so often.
Sure.
We can get through the word problem language which they use. On the other hand, Big Ideas is more of what we might consider a traditional like pre-algebra textbook where the chapters are more like fractions and variables and then exponents and then like calculating surface area of a sphere or whatever it is. And so that's like a pre-algebra textbook. And ratios is a piece of it, it's a chapter of it, but then you move on to like exponents, then you move on to whatever factoring, then you move on to whatever it is. So it's a little bit more like the structure that we would be used to.
Correct.
Rather than Eureka had like kind of tipped it all on its head and it kind of reorganized everything, which makes it hard to pull pieces out because
it makes it impossible. I'll file said it makes it impossible to pull pieces out.
You can't pull anything out of it because
it's all disconnected.
So, and what you're really trying to do is Eureka wasn't allowing you to have to build a certain level of mastery, is what you're saying, so that you can move on to the next thing and then implement that because it's all scattered.
I think mathematically there's a structure, right? You have to generally have a solid understanding of fractions and decimals before you can get into solving area of a cylinder, right? So because there's a lot of fractions, no cylinder comes off as like exactly 2 centimeters is not how it works. So you're looking at these things and it was very scattered in like you said in Eureka where Big Ideas kind of builds on that. And then they just added something else too that's kind of I didn't even think of with Big Ideas. Eureka doesn't offer an algebra component for 8th grade. There's no pre-algebra component for 7th grade. So you have to essentially pick apart the book constantly to figure out how am I going to prepare these students for 8th grade algebra. So if we continue with Eureka down the road with Fidelity, we're basically, and again, that's our choice as a district if we decide this, you're kind of taking algebra off the plate for 8th graders, which is something I don't know if we're ready to do, if we want to do, because I feel it's valuable. There are kids ready. I see it. You've taught it for many, many years. I teach it this year, and I absolutely say, if we took this away from these kids, it would be a huge detriment. So Big Ideas offers that piece of the pre-algebra possibly in 7th grade algebra and 8th grade that Eureka does not at all. So that's another component that's missing as well.
But if we can do Eureka, ideally, it sounds more difficult than they sold us on a couple of years ago. But if we could, they would be doing some algebra in 7th grade and some algebra in 8th grade, but not like a year of algebra.
Yeah, but they would always be doing algebra pieces. Like that starts now with algebra expressions and equations starts now in 4th, 5th, maybe in 2nd grade now. So you're always going to be doing it, but that algebra, the subject area, is a whole different animal of like, you're working with exponents, you're working with systems, you're doing all kinds of stuff that isn't
linear equations and
quadratics and
and those are the kinds of things that we're looking at in terms of like the articulation from 8th grade to comp to 9th grade or whatever, skipping a year, going to 10th grade, whatever, geometry, that decision will be based on taking algebra as we traditionally label it.
Right, yeah, you wouldn't be, I don't feel a student would be able, I actually know they would not be able to pass or be ready for geometry as a first-year student in Concord if they weren't given the opportunity to take algebra here.
Because 8th grade math, Common Core doesn't get into the quadratics piece and stuff. Right. They go like 2/3 of the way through. They get to systems of equations, but they don't go beyond the systems of equations to get into quadratics. That's when they change their direction and go into geometry and stuff.
And to that, there's a handful of kids, for sure, many kids in 7th grade right now that I feel are gearing towards that algebra readiness. And like I don't want to teach them another year of just 8th grade math when they're ready to move on. We wouldn't want to hold them back. I mean, that's part of the whole differentiation. It's like, let's get these kids where they need to be. Let's get them to that level because who knows, maybe they're our next engineers. I don't know,
Right, if they don't take algebra in 8th grade, it makes it much more challenging to take calculus as a senior.
Yes.
And so that
they need to get ahead early to be able to.
Right. if they're ready, right? And not everyone's ready, and that's fine too. The Big Ideas offers both of those pieces that Eureka does not.
So we have any additional questions regarding the math program? There's nothing we're taking action on tonight. It's already.
Did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you. I was going to simplify it in such a more elegant fashion. You guys all got all quadratic and all that stuff. I'm going to put a little spin on it, but whatever. But there's nothing we're taking action on at the moment, right? So this
The
is,
current budget is managing the pilot end of it. It's, there's a cost to the pilot end. But, if we're looking as we get a little deeper into the pilot and at the end of trimester 2, we'll evaluate.
is this
what's
a,
next.
so from a costing standpoint, where we have our last opportunity to play with the budget for next year comes up in the deliberative session. I mean, is this something that it's a $50,000 program, it's $1 million program, it's $5,000?
It's like a million, but I'll take 900,000 for myself. If you don't mind.
And the reason why I ask is if it's a negligible amount, it doesn't matter, right? If it's a program that's 50 or 100K.
I think but I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm trying to read this. But if we were to go in through the whole middle school, again, I can't read low light anymore, so I'm getting old. I want to say if we were to go with it.
Day past 50.
What's that? Thank you, because I'm not there yet. I think you're supposed to say like 35. Yeah, I think it was like $100 per kid for the book and for the digital copy, but the book you pay that one time, right? That's the first initial cost. The digital copy is kind of you pay a little bit each year, or you can buy like a 5-year.
So you're talking middle schools, 3 grades, 150 kids.
Yes.
200 kids.
So you're talking between 10 and 50, say 10, 15,000 if you want to talk like the initial go of it, but that comes down after the subsequent years because then in the following year, you're not paying 15 because you already bought the books. You're just buying the licenses, right? Because the books themselves are like $80 a piece.
And we also talked about getting a class of the book versus every kid having their own book.
Right.
Since there is digital access.
So
I was thinking that it would be nice to.
I think that qualifies as negligible. That's fine. I just needed to know if we needed to.
So the $1 million is off the table.
$1 million off the table. We are not going to give you $1 million for math. I'm sorry.
We'd write
It's
a
worth it,
program
I'm telling
for
you.
you.
Would you?
Yeah. Sign your name to it.
It wouldn't solve that.
Give Jeff a quadratic equation. If he can solve it, he can have $1 million.
Well, I can teach him.
Yeah.
While you're here, if we end up on another default budget, that may become a relevant question. What would you say to investing in 7th and 8th grade for the first year and then adding 6th grade the following year?
I mean, selfishly, I'm open to it because I teach 7th grade and possibly some of the 8th grades.
I can work with that because there's there's an online free text that I can access from Big Ideas that it's doable.
But I think that's it to move forward, if that's the direction we have to go as a group, I think we all support that idea to move forward.
Yes.
Right? Obviously, we understand it could take stages to get there, but it depends but yeah, if we move forward, let's do it. Like that's the way we have to start. Let's start that way.
So we would expect probably a report. So the pilot you're going to run now is going to be through the balance of the school year, or are we just running it for the second?
I think we're gonna go. I want to go through the balance of the year. I think that we talked about it, but we're gonna definitely benchmark, like try to figure out.
You already told me you didn't want to benchmark.
Well, it was 2 different types of benchmarks. That we're gonna do the benchmark of like, hey, the survey, and then we talked about running an interim star to see where kids are at and to see if there's growth. Because we hope, ultimately we hope there's growth, but I don't want that to be our
But
driving force.
The current intent then will be to run this through the balance of the school year.
Yes.
So we would, an update towards the end of the year is probably a reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
With the reason there. Okay, so sometime May or June, if we can just kind of get a wrap up.
I would want it, I don't want to rush you guys.
Sounds
Can you do it a little bit, can you do it a little bit earlier? I'm just thinking if we have
At the end of the day,
surplus,
you're in charge.
if we have surplus to try to buy some books before the end of the year.
Yeah,
if we could get that decision earlier.
When would you like that?
Yeah, I mean,
First.
is April too early?
Because 3 months, 4 months.
I think
Have
we'd
a
have a
sense,
much better
have a
understanding of what's
sense.
going on for sure.
Last week of April.
Yeah.
First meeting in May.
Yeah, like,
First meeting in May?
After April vacation.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Or you're on the calendar.
What's that? Well, I'm not at environmental school. I'm not at Mira Vista, am I? What date's that meeting? Because I'm going to Mira Vista
It's the
for.
first Wednesday in April.
Oh, okay.
First April of May, first Wednesday of May.
As long as it's not the following week, we're good.
May 3rd.
Okay, works. So, Jeff? Just
Like, perfect.
just like, yeah, we'll be there. All right.
So you can still come.
Yeah.
I have a sneaky suspicion we won't see Jeff much after. All right, is there any other questions from the board regarding this? I think ultimately, the board's initial concern when we heard we were switching programs was just kind of this whole, like, wait a second, we just did this whole year-long thing to get in, and we were supposed to, and it's feeding into this. I mean, ultimately, you're math teachers, and you're gonna teach math. And if we took all the programs away from you, I have no doubt that you're still gonna teach the math, right? So part of it is making sure you have the tools necessary for the kids to succeed. I think the other part of it from the board's perspective was just to make sure we weren't like, whoa, we're jumping into this and we're jumping into that, because we don't want to do this every year. I mean, if it's a $20,000 investment, kids are going to succeed, great. If it's just going to be a $20,000 investment and $20,000 investment and $20,000 investment, we want to.
We don't want that either.
We don't want that.
Yeah.
No, and I can imagine it's an undertaking to kind of rework everything, but if you're already doing it anyway, then, you know, I'm also not an educator, so.
No, but you said it perfectly. You said like the idea of we need, the key word is we need the tools in place to help us do this, right? Obviously we can teach, like you said, but the point of it is like we need tools in place to help these kids. And because not everything is done in the classroom, right? It's done at home too. Right? We need more parents involved in the students' learning as well. And I think this book offers more of that then. And I could show you all 5 of you, all the books, and basically put it on there and be like, look at these, tell me what you think you could help your kids with. And I 100% guarantee you're going to choose Big Ideas over Eureka because one of them doesn't make sense and one of them makes sense.
Sadly, a lot of parents don't remember middle school math.
On purpose.
I wish he had a statement. They didn't teach it like that when we were kids. Yeah, they did. Math has not changed. In the middle school, it's still the same. 5,000 years.
I remember a 5,000-year-old teacher at Central High School who was still teaching.
Right, I think I have 5,000-year-old teachers.
Used to be able to throw chalk across the classroom in the forehead.
According to my students, I am 5,000.
All right, do we have any additional questions regarding math before we move on to data, which I believe some of you are staying with us. I don't know who, or all, or some.
I'm going to watch it.
Okay, so if you're staying with us for data, please stay. And if you were here just for math, this is a great opportunity to make a run for it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
coming out
Thank you,
tonight.
Jose.
All right, so now you take off the math hat, put on the data hat, which probably looks a lot like a math hat anyway. And I believe, I'm assuming based on.
You guys want to stay here and I can run the.
I might need to be closer to read it.
Yeah, of course, of course. Come on up.
I would love to stand. I've been sitting for too long.
But maybe I can put it on my
Whatever, you know.
Yeah, I'll put that outside on the keychain. Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day. That is, I'm already amazed. Oh, that was the TV that did that?
Yeah.
All right, I'm actually on camera.
All right.
Fire away.
So we, Jamie and Samantha, sorry, are here. This presentation though was also done with Kristen Davis was part of the conversation as well. She was not able to be here tonight, but she certainly helped in putting it all together. So as you know, the New Hampshire SAS test is given each year to our grades 3 through 8, as well as our 11th graders, but we're just going to talk about our grades 3 through 8. I believe a couple of board meetings ago, the board was interested in looking at the results of the SAS test for Deerfield Community School compared to that of the state of New Hampshire. Those results came out recently, so we are here to give you overall reports. And I'm gonna let these two experts here know way more than all of us in the room. And I am just gonna feed them support them and offer any input I can. Answer any questions I can. So, take it away, ladies.
So I'll go ahead and start off. So we have compiled just a series of data points that kind of compare things that were from like pre-pandemic to our post-pandemic test in 2021. So this is one of our first pieces of data. So essentially what we're looking at here is the state's targets. So the state created some goals where they wanted our schools in New Hampshire to reach certain proficiency levels. So at the top in pink, we have the ELA proficiency, in blue, we have math proficiency, and in green, we have science proficiency. There aren't actually any target goals for science, at least through the state of New Hampshire. And so we can see where our school performed pre-pandemic. So the state's goal was to be at 60.5% proficiency for ELA. We didn't quite make it there, but I think once you see where everybody else is, you're gonna be like, that's fine, we're good. But we did meet proficiency for math, and this is pre-pandemic. And if you look over here, the target goal actually increased after the pandemic. So for ELA, they wanted schools to be performing at a 62.5% proficiency. Again, we didn't quite make it there, but I think once you see our next slide, you're gonna be okay about it. And then for math proficiency, we did again meet that proficiency level. Again, science did not have a target, at least established through the state of New Hampshire.
Just for some background, the year that we went into pandemic, 2020, we did not take the New Hampshire SAS test. Our grades 3 through 8 did not. Nobody in the state of New Hampshire took that. When we returned in the fall, our students were expected to take it. It was a lot. It was met with a lot of very opinionated teachers who felt very strongly that our students were just coming back from a pandemic, had lost a lot of learning over the course of time. And many of our schools were in not normal situations in terms of cohorts. We had cohort A, we had cohort B, but it was expected of us to do it, so we did it because we are good soldiers and we do what we're told. So when we're talking about 2021, we are actually talking about, we took it in the fall of 2020, and then we took it again in the spring of 2021. So it was quite a year for our students. It's a hard test. It takes a long time. It is extremely challenging and very rigorous. And so it was a lot for our kids.
So we're looking at spring of 19, and then we're looking at spring of 21.
And there's more data points as we move forward.
But on this particular slide, it's, and so that when we see a 21, it's the spring of 21. is the test, and we're looking at that. One other quick question is, it looks like the colored bars representative of the school, we don't have a number there, but it looks like, did we see a little bit of growth, even though we didn't necessarily hit the state's target?
Yes, we did, definitely, yeah. We'll be able to see that
Okay.
there in a couple other slides.
This is
Andy.
Could I just jump in quickly? Could I
Yes.
trouble Nate or Kristen maybe to zoom in with the camera on the board? Is that possible? Just wanted to be high maintenance. Thank you.
We need to magnify that.
That's your old age, Andy.
See me squinting.
So when we were previously talking about some of those state targets and we're saying, don't worry about it. This is partially that reason where in theory we would love to be meeting those state targets. But when we take a look at where the state is actually performing versus where our school is performing, we're doing pretty well for ourselves. So within this chart here, again, this is spring of 2019, that is pre-pandemic. We have ELA, math, and science proficiency. So at this point, yeah, I was gonna say, so things in my brain just look different. So this is where, so yellow would be where our Deerfield Community School was performing. So that would be at around 50%, and this is where the state of New Hampshire was performing. When we compare that to post-pandemic, we can see that we are above that goal or above the performance level of the state of New Hampshire for ELA. And similarly, we see the same thing happening in math proficiency. Our math proficiency is actually far above the performance of the state of New Hampshire. And for science, we were lagging a little bit in science, and then after the pandemic, we actually jumped ahead there. So that was pretty exciting for us. I know people tend to mostly want to focus on ELA and math, but we always find that science, like having some proficiency there is kind of like an indicator that we have really good educators here. Do you want to add? You have a question, go for it.
It looks like the state did adjust their targets, recognizing post-pandemic, their expectations look like it went down a little bit. Is that a fair statement?
It's not targets, this is performance.
That's data.
Performance.
Yes.
So this is where they're actually performing, not where we want them to be.
Yes.
So, and I'm gonna ask questions and maybe the answers are already kind of embedded in this, but I'm curious. So the state obviously has access to all the same data. So have they done an analysis? Because what it looks like is where we held the ground or actually made gains to a certain extent. I mean, percentage wise, it looks like we stayed close to or improvement for ELA and for math. Science was a pretty good jump. But there's a lot of fall off across the state as far as performance goes. Has there been any indication from the state as to what they think occurred? Was it just a differentiation? Was it the way that we kind of processed our way through the pandemic, or have they done a dive into that, or is it kind of like, okay, that's over here now?
Not that I know of. I mean, the only reason I can speak to what I know of Deerfield and our Deerfield educators and how much that little work that went into that during the pandemic. So
yeah.
I can speak to that. Like we worked our butts off, you know, and we really were there for the students as much as we could be, and parents and families, and same with the families. Like the families were very involved, and so I can speak to Deerfield and what I saw in Deerfield as far as the community. So, but as far as research, no. Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Enough, yeah.
I mean, I can't really answer your question. I wish I could.
I don't know if you want to go, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but
Okay, you're
okay.
standing there, I can't see it. No, you're fine.
So within these two charts, just because they organize them within 3-year chunks, we couldn't make one continuous chart for this. But this is going to be our growth between the 2017 school year, which was a few years pre-pandemic, versus that this actually brings us to spring of 2022, whereas before we were looking at some spring of 2021s. And as you can see, we are actually doing pretty well. Maybe you can't see, it's really small font. I was being presumptuous there. But it seems that we have been doing pretty well in this regard. Again, we have ELA proficiency, math proficiency, science proficiency, and then everything is broken down. They call it district. I think that's still just the Deerfield School District though, so not including the remaining schools in the SAU. So they say district and then school and then state, so we can see that comparison. So within here, we are still performing higher than the rest of the state at the 2022 level, and we just won't look at that one. I'm just kidding. But we are doing well for ourselves in that 2022 test. It is hard to see though, I apologize for that.
Any thoughts on why science has jumped so much?
This is my first year here. I've only been here for 4 months. So I'm gonna say it's because y'all are doing great.
I guess it's back to 3 levels. It's not, there was that 1 year that everything was low.
Well, we had science, I mean, to a certain extent, science is probably one of the harder subjects to teach through COVID as well.
Right, so that would take a bigger hit.
So your learning loss there is probably going to be a more substantial kind of.
And it became science was a lot of videos and, turned on to a ton of different science apps that were out there, lots of mystery science.
Doesn't necessarily
correlate.
coalesce to everything that we're trying to do.
Yeah, because the science, New Hampshire SAS test is no joke. It's like it brings you through the kids through the entire scientific process. And I'm trying to think too, if there was a switch in grade, because it was 4th grade for a while, and then it became, Nate, do you remember that switch? When that switch happened, because then it became 5th and 8th.
Oh, that took the.
Yeah, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not either. The grade levels changed. Do you remember when that happened?
I think that was back.
That was a long time ago, wasn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was a long time ago.
Okay, when it switched grade levels? Okay.
I know that's the SAS.
Okay,
That was, could have been an SBAC thing too, right?
could have been,
Do
could
they
have been
do
all of
science
that.
in SBAC? Do they do science in SBAC?
Yes.
Everybody had some.
Awesome. And this is just a percentage of our students who participate in the SAS test. We have very high participation with all of our tests, so that's not something to be concerned about. We're at 96, 96, and 99% participation. So not bad.
Yeah, but as you know, students can opt out of the test, and we have a good number of students that have done that at the third through eighth grade level, so. They have to get permission to do so, or not permission, but they have to sign a waiver that they're opting out, and there's some consequences to people opting out of the test, funding wise as well as.
I was just gonna say, please mention that we still are held accountable when they opt out.
Yeah, even
And
though
so
they're-
does that, I don't recall the masses, but if a student opts out, are they graded as a 0? So it counts against our averages?
It's just it lowers our participation rate and
But
we are held accountable to that because the federal flow through funds are they don't have a waiver like New Hampshire does.
Okay, so it impacts funding, but it doesn't impact.
Well, it could, I mean,
could
it just
impact
impacts our
funding.
scores.
But as far as like a scoring standpoint, do those opted out students, does that pull our school level scores down? Because if they're scored as a 0, they're a student, they should have taken a test, and they scored as a 0?
I don't know the answer to
I
that.
don't know if they do on the state results. I don't think so. It's not on the state,
Well,
because those are all state results.
with 500 students in our kids in our school roughly, that's only 5 kids who aren't opting out.
Yeah, your participation rate is great.
99%, and that was last spring.
That was science.
Spring of 2022.
This is either spring of 21 or spring of 22. It's in process of 22. Just because I know we're trying to gather like the most recent data on that. And then this is just a comparison of where students fell within that SAS test. So students, when they take this state test, they essentially receive a score between 1 and 4, 1 being below proficiency and 4 being typically above proficiency. And so what we're always hoping for are 3s and 4s. That would indicate that you are either proficient or higher. So this is just a breakdown of our students at our school and where they fell within that 1 to 4 range. And then these are just also just some useful websites. So there's a Deerfield Community School historical data dashboard, and that's where we pulled some of our data from, but a lot of that data, like that historical data, is to be found on there. I believe that was put together by
Chris Motica,
Yes.
former curriculum instructional assistant, yeah.
So that data is available using that website as well, and this is linked, so we can make sure that the link is sent out to you as well. And then the Department of Education recently came out with an iReport system where they're able to kind of create like a state report card based off of our schools. And so most of those charts that we saw today were based off of that report card. So if you are curious about our school or any of those other demographics that you would like to look at or compare our school to another school, you're more than welcome to go onto that website in order to access any of that information or compare our school to the rest of the state as well. If there's any other information that we didn't talk about that you would be interested in seeing.
I just had a question pop in mind. Can we go back one slide real quick?
Of course.
Do we have any kind of data or ability to track if there's a correlation with our competency-based learning? So ELA, 47%, 45% of our students are, at a 2 or below. When we look at our trimester report cards, do we aggregate it and are we able to say that that applies to the way we're also grading our students or have any kind of feel for that?
I was gonna defer to these two just because I haven't really seen the new report.
Can you explain that again?
So I have 2 kids, right? So I look at their report cards and it's all 3s and 4s. But the entire student population, right? Do we aggregate the data so we can say that where you see 45% of our students are at 1 and 2s, do we see that?
We compare that to report card.
To their report card data. So
calibrate our grading in the school to make it be.
And I'm not saying that we should, I'm just
Right.
curious, are we assessing these kids in
So
level?
so are you asking if the kids that are getting 1s and 2s on this are getting 1s and 2s on their
Thank
report
you.
cards?
It's hard to, go ahead, Jamie, because I was gonna just bring up the body of evidence in terms of, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's hard because this is, what I always try to remind myself is this is one point of data, and and it's one day, right?
Yep.
And so it's really hard to look at this and say this is our students,
Yep.
right? In general, at all, because it's one point of data, and there's so much that goes on every day.
Yep.
So, best practices is to look at 3 and triangulate our data. So we have our in-class assessments, we have STAR, we have DIBELS, we have universal screeners. So we have a lot of different data that goes into looking at students and how we get our 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep.
Not just this one data point.
So if we were to look at STAR data, because in years past, we've done this exercise, we've looked at all this data, we've also looked at what we see in STAR data. We've always seen a very different data set with STAR. We typically see much higher kind of scoring in STAR. And so have we looked at, say, STAR data overlaid against SAS data to see if there's any. Because I think we all look at, I think a lot of us look at SAS data with exactly that. That's one day, no accommodations, the kids, it's a very, it isn't a great test to a certain extent, right? But we have to do it.
Right, yeah.
But are we, all those other sets, I mean, we look at, I see the STAR results that come home for my kids, I'm like, great. But do we look at that across the school level and ever overlay it against that to say, okay, well, we see an ELA, a 54%, proficiency. We look at STAR and we see a 72% proficiency. We look at, I mean, have we kind of taken it to that extent to overlay that as well to see if we're seeing? Because part of any test is, are we teaching to the test or are we just teaching well students? And is the test is targeting one certain kind of thing? Are we?
I think a related question to that before I started to jump in is to what end? Why would we want to do that? Is it to get at evaluating our program?
I think a lot of it.
To evaluate the supports in our school that we're supporting kids with?
So
why would we do that?
So I think part of it is you're looking for, if there's consistency across all 3 or across every data set, then then that kind of creates, I guess, I don't want to say a concern, but maybe that's causing you to dig in a little bit deeper. If you see one anomaly amongst 3 or 4 or 5 different data sets, well, I'm comfortable with anomaly because I'm looking at 3 or 4 or 5 different sets that are showing something different. But if it's across the board, you're seeing very similar data, then we probably need to have supports.
So you're talking about on a student by student basis, how do we best support that student?
Well, I think on a school level basis, you probably can see it from the 30,000 foot view and then, because it's, to a certain extent, it becomes from a support standpoint, the tools and the funding and all that. Do we need more support? And how do we target that? Or are we seeing a data set where we go, okay, well, this one doesn't jive with everything else we see, so.
I can speak to in the K through 3 world, and actually what we do in middle school, we have meetings very frequently where we look at, on our data sheets, we have all of our points of data. So you can see it across the board and see, we start our data sheet with the previous year's SAS score. So then we can see from there where they are. We can see how they're performing. But it's also important to note how different each assessment is. STAR is, even though it's a computerized test, it is completely different than this test, right? And then our other screeners some are paper and pencil, some are interview. So they're all very different too. And so some kids do perform better by having that one-on-one interview, whereas others are going to perform better having that space to think out on computer. So we look at it for sure, and it's a piece of our conversation. And it's a piece of our data sheets, but it's also, like I said, everything is considered a piece of information, and we triangulate that data and really think about our students.
I think to answer your question that you had posed to Zach, I would say all of the above. So what you asked, right? Because on the last slide is the Deerfield report card, right? And how do we fare against New Hampshire uses one data point to assess us, and that's what our community members look at. How is Deerfield doing? But it really doesn't give that whole picture, right? So taking all of those data points gives us that feedback on how are we doing at the 30,000 foot level, and are we actually, performing the way that we want, right? Because the parents get a very granular picture of this is how my student's doing, right? But it's that aggregation of data and all those different data points that really translate to a report card, not a test that stresses kids out and doesn't necessarily indicate the way they learn.
Yeah, I think that my question is getting at the idea that all of the work you just described in a sentence is a tremendous amount of time. And so my point is more like, what are we trying to gain by doing that? And who is getting paid to do all of that?
Well, that's 100% valid,
Is
I
it you
guess.
volunteering to do all of that?
No, I am not.
No, he's driving the bus.
Yes, I'll be driving the bus.
So that's like, if it's an immediate case, like, how do we support a student? That's an important piece, but to do all of what you described is a big ask.
Well, and I guess part of that question was if we've already done it, I'd be curious to see what it looks like. But if we haven't already done it, I'm most certainly not gonna ask for it to be created. But if it's already like there, it'd be kind of interesting to see what it looks like, or maybe we had already been looking at it. I think from a board level perspective, I think our focus is to provide the resources necessary to create every opportunity we can for the kids. And so, we're not here every day, right? And we're not in the classroom, we're not teaching the kids. So we have to ask these questions to try to say, okay, do we need more resources? And obviously Patty and Kristen come to us when they say they think they need more resources, but these are opportunities for us just to kind of ask them.
I love the question. I was asking that earlier. Like, it makes me think, right? And they didn't. I'm very happy to say I don't have the answer. I'll find it for you. If
it's not 400 hours of data entry, spit out. So.
Yeah, but I mean, ultimately, we're all here for.
Thank you.
Yes, you did wonderful. It was Samantha's debut.
Yeah.
All right. I believe that wraps up data then, as far as
Thank
this
you,
point.
guys.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for taking time away from your families and coming back here for the 15th and 18th hour together. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much. All right. That brings us to contract discussions for Concord. So kind of a brief update before we get cracking more deeply into this. The MBC has finished up its cycle of activities for the year and has recessed until after the deliberatives. If they decide they want to have a meeting, they can, but it sounds like it'll be until sometime after the election. They voted on the articles. And I have the results of that in my truck. But the regards to the budget, most items were favored by the NBC. I think they were all favored by the NBC. None of them were unanimous. The high school contract, I believe, was a split vote, if I recall correctly. It was 5-5. We had a conversation there regarding the high school contract, and then we had a conversation that also kind of circled back to the proposed, the petition warrant article regarding fully funded or taxpayer funded school choices, probably the best way to describe it. So, we have as a board, obviously our objective is to communicate clear, accurate, and concise information out to the community in regards to the article for the high school contract in Concord. And I think part of that is discussing how we want to start that process. We have, I think I guess that's where I want to start as a discussion point, right? And how we want to approach that so that the community has accurate information to base their decisions on. We obviously have to pay attention to make sure that nothing we do violates any electioneering laws. So we want to pass everything by legal, obviously. But I think the first thing we probably want to start doing, and this kind of came to light to me when actually the NBC discussions was, we've put the contract on the website. It certainly has become public, but I think we need to probably publish it in a couple more places. Maybe utilize Facebook and publish it.
Like the actual contract?
The actual contract. So let's just start with the basics, right? Yeah. There's nothing that is, I think those are starting points. Let's put the contract out, and then we need to start figuring out how we want to communicate what this contract does to the community and how we want to provide that information. Am I making sense? Am I overarching statements?
I agree.
Okay. So with that in mind, do we have any ideas? I mean, yes, we talked about newsletters. Obviously, Kendra has taken the mantle of Facebook facilitator for the school board. Communicator at large, I like that. But what methods, how do we want to approach this? Do we want to have I certainly think we should look at scheduling another question and answer night in regards to the contract. Not necessarily, it's not for I want to answer factual questions about the contract. And that's kind of how I want that night to go. Or I'm thinking we should have a night that's about talking about the contract and not necessarily, I want this, I want that. I just want to answer questions about the contract and how that will work out. So I think we should look at scheduling something for that as well.
Before the deliberative session?
Because that becomes part of the greater overarching question.
So it can't be changed at the deliberative session, right? The negotiated contract can't be changed at the deliberative session, right? So I would lean towards closer to the vote rather than say mid to late February, early March.
Like deliberative is what, the 11th of February?
Yeah, so we could really make that the starting point of the first meeting in March if we wanted to.
Yeah.
So I think that's.
The vote's what, the 14th of March or something?
Yeah. So is that a?
You don't have, your first meeting is the 15th because vacation is the first.
Oh, that's no good. Mr. Langlois will be in Bermuda now, you said that. Oh, sorry, that's a big one. Can we call a meeting that week? I guess that'd be the week after vacation.
Well, like Wednesday the 4th or something?
It'd be this.
Monday is the 6th. We have exec board on the 8th.
So that would be on a Wednesday, we have to do it on Monday.
Is it first? But that's vacation.
It's vacation, yeah.
Is this where the state is split? Some of the schools are gonna be taking earlier.
The vacations got weird this year, right?
Ours is February 27th through March 3rd.
Okay, so then to March 3rd. So then we could, that following week, could we call them, I guess we could call them.
But Wednesday is exec board.
Wednesday is exec board.
So it could be Monday or Tuesday.
Could be a Monday or a Tuesday?
Be Tuesday because they're doing NBC.
I don't have NBC. So I guess that would be a first question. Is there a date that you see, Patty, that looks?
Tuesday, well, if you want to do it Tuesday, that's March 7th.
Does that work?
Thursday? Got a bunch of districts.
I think this.
I mean, I can see her calendar on my phone and my head's about to explode.
Keep flipping.
Oh, it's awful. Make it stop.
Delete. The 7th works.
Okay. So then we're gonna schedule a meeting for March 7th. And is the board comfortable with that?
I have commitment.
Okay, we're still gonna have a meeting on March 7th, I think, if we can have a quorum. We need to.
Well, Andy would be remote again, right, Andy?
Yes, unless you have it on the 8th.
Are you back? What's the 8th?
The 8th is the Wednesday.
Is the exact.
I I should be back.
Okay.
So, depends on storm, all that sort of fun stuff.
The 9th works.
The 9th works?
Yep.
So we're looking at the 9th,
The talent show.
it's a talent show.
Woohoo.
All right. Let's
Way more fun.
Let's just run with the 7th for the time being. And we have another,
Can you just say you can make it?
So you'll have, at least you have a quorum.
I don't think I am scheduled that far out.
so let's tentatively say March 7th. And let's just have a public forum regarding the contract itself, okay? And I just want to have a Q&A, what it means, how it works, yada, yada, yada. All right, so that's step one. That's one item. Another item, I think we should start by just, let's put the contract out in more easily accessible places for people. So
Where does that mean posting it?
I think we just put it up on Facebook to start.
Or
The
put
link.
the whole contract on Facebook? No, put
You mean the link?
The link, so where it's up to what? So can we put it on the school website? Can we post it on?
Well, it's currently on the SAU site anyway.
As I say, it's
Behind this funny wall to get. It's like you can't link into, you know what I mean?
It's on like SharePoint. Yeah, and you have to, yes.
So it's behind
I know what
the
you're
school
saying.
website. Whereas on the school website, you can just link to it.
All right, so if we can move it to the school website and add a link there as well, and then if we get the link over to Kendra to put on the Facebook.
Do I have access to it?
Yes, but I'll make sure you get the right one.
Okay, so
I
that's,
think the one in the drive is dated older than the SharePoint one. Okay.
all right, so let's sort that out. I know we're still working with Concord to have a kind of an open house for Deerfield families to go see Concord High School and walk around and tour it. Obviously, we want to get that pinned down as well. If you heard anything else, I know one of the dates they came back with wasn't going to work.
Correct.
But if we can try to pin that down.
I tried to film last week, but I'll ping them again if I don't hear anything in the next couple of days.
Okay, yeah, I'd just like to get something on the calendar for that.
Is that the kind of thing where it's an evening and the Deerfield students could be?
Anybody can go, and they want to try to have students there. And then they're trying to do the same thing, find a night when there's not a bunch of stuff.
Sure, that building's probably always in use.
It's okay.
So I guess that's kind of what I was bringing for ideas for tonight, but I certainly, postcards, anything else, like I said, I just kind of want to get that conversation started. Explanations, benefits of the contract, that's the type of stuff we want to make sure we are.
Well, can we start with, what we brought up last meeting was that the mailer that the town puts out every year is a booklet of
Voter
the voter guide. I made some notes that we could maybe look at and get approved here, that before I get something to label, read the proper channels. Because those are due in like next week or something.
Yeah, he said toward the end of January, so.
I'm sorry, were those in the drive?
Yeah, I put them in yesterday, yeah.
I didn't know the names and numbers.
You didn't know?
And then get to the draft.
Oh. That's the.
Yeah.
Those ones. Can we print those?
Yeah, this is what he did. I don't have. I proved it off camera.
One of the public speakers brought up this idea of a mailer, and that was something that we did last year with the building idea, and that was obviously, as was brought up to us a number of times, that required extra money that we spent. This would be starting going out on the town.
Right.
And the school, do we pay for it? Is the town?
No, they did the whole voter guide.
The town pays for it.
Or I don't know who pays for it, but we send the information to the town and it goes. I don't know how they do it.
And so what I did was I just took a copy of the one, and then as the draft that I saw, and then I put a couple of notes there that would be in brackets, and just like all the other notes would appear at the bottom of the warrant. So you have a copy of that?
I've got a bunch of stuff here that I didn't go through yet. So look online.
Just a draft, so I'm looking for ideas, and I don't know.
Yeah, so your note on warrant article 4?
Yeah, sure, let's start 4, because there's a couple others as well.
So Jeff has it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the question I have is, are we able to discuss
Because I know what we discussed in negotiations.
The last sentence.
Yeah, I'd like to put a what that actual number would look like.
Well, I don't have it in front of me. What number?
A tuition agreement with Concord would cost significantly more.
What their
per
tuition
student.
rate is.
Yes, so I asked them last week, and they did give us a number, so I think it's okay because they gave us the number outside of the negotiations.
Okay.
The business administrator, it was an estimate of over 16,000, not an exact number, but he said it would be over 16. So you could do like an approximate. So it would cost approximately however much more per student.
I think the other thing that we really need to figure out, wording is correct, but part of this contract is guaranteeing replacement for all of our students. And tuition agreements, if we just run around and write a bunch of tuition agreements, doesn't necessarily guarantee placement for every kid. It's very easy to say it does, but and it's easy to say in principle, but in all actuality, if we don't have an agreement that guarantees a spot for every kid, we can have students that school districts opt out of accept. Because on tuition agreements, they have to be accepted in the schools. And so I think wording that and highlighting that becomes an important thing, because that was a huge driving factor, I think, through the whole process for the board, was making sure that every single kid had a placement for high school and avoiding that experience that this community had 20-ish years ago. And so, I think, that should become part of the conversation. We know there's going to be a cost associated with it. It's a very difficult number to assess. We can certainly forecast out a cost difference if 100% of our kids chose to go to Co-Brown, right? I mean, that's an easy thing to calculate out. We can calculate out what our cost will be at Concord, because we have a pretty good estimate of what that's going to be. So I think that's probably two kind of starting points. The things we can't cost out is what students receive services and how those costs are going to affect us. I don't, maybe you can weigh in, Patty, but I don't know if there's a great way to do it. But if we don't have that kind of that guaranteed placement agreement, how does that impact special education costs?
Well, Concord has a lot of special education programs. I don't know, I mean, it would be hard to that's not comparing apples to apples. If we had a smaller school that didn't have all the programs, then they would have no choice but to be in another school or a placement. And if we didn't have a school of record or a school that had the programs, we'd have to pay for the out-of-district placement instead. But it's hard to
quantify.
Yeah, it's
We know
there's
it would be
lots of
more.
different learning styles and different programs, and you never know.
We certainly know
who's gonna need
it would
what.
be more, we just don't know to the extent.
Is it fair to say that because Concord has a lot of these programs already in the building, that providing services for our students is more cost efficient, cost effective, as opposed to a smaller school? Since Co-Brown is the one that has come up, Co-Brown has fewer services in the building.
I think it's fair to say that all of our student needs can be met at Concord High, and that we certainly have had kids at Co-Brown that could not have their needs met because there wasn't a specific type of program.
Right.
But that's hard to
discuss.
I think the important message to communicate is that we're dealing with a community that around election season gets really involved, right? And warrant Article 4 has very concrete numbers, a very concrete impact to this is how it will affect your taxes, this is how all of our kids will be moved, educated. Yeah. And the effort to strike down warrant Article 4 and move the town against it is a very opaque argument that we're dealing with, right? So what I hear is we're trying to quantify, we have a very quantified position that's easy to digest, and we're trying to garner support against.
We're not electioneering.
We're not electioneering, right? Sorry. But there's a lot of good words and adjectives and ideas without the concrete numbers. What is this actually going to cost the town?
The dollar per thousand doesn't work anymore.
And to get dollar per thousand, it has to come from a total somewhere, right? So we've got these two things. We've got the cost, which I think we need to try and quantify and make known to the voters. And then also the impact of, yeah, right now, enrollments are down. Schools might accept kids. What's it look like in 5 years? What's it look like in 10 years? What if a new development goes into Northwood, right? Or Ascending Town? And those are, so I hear what you're saying about can our students' needs be met? That brings us into an area where suddenly we're very concrete and quantifiable, and we're moving into a gray area. So I think if we stick to educating the voters on what they're actually voting on and that impact will be more impactful and more effective.
Okay. That's why we're having this conversation, right? Is we can also calculate out the savings of the proposed contract. And we know what the reduction, what the removal of the capital fee would save us on a given year, right? We know
We have the tuition for next year, which the contract frees. So we know what it's gonna be per student if the contract is approved in the year 24-25.
right, and we know the capital fee is going away in perpetuity. So, I mean, we can calculate out the real savings to the taxpayer based on the number of students who we currently have. So I think that's something else to add to it.
I will say the wording of the elimination of the capital fee in the contract is very confusing. And I know some people in town have thought it's only going away for the first year because it says like in the contract, it says something along the lines of like, in the first year, it will freeze tuition and the capital fee will go away.
Capital fee is gone for the contract.
But I don't think that's very clear.
Well, it was written by lawyers.
We're not
And now it's being
magicians.
translated by.
I think it needs to, if we just add the capital fee indefinitely or for the term of the contract, maybe it will help clarify it.
Okay, can I say something about
Yeah, third line down.
Yeah, see, this is confusing. The contract limits the capital fee and freezes tuition for the first year.
Gotcha. So the contract limits capital fee in.
For the duration of
So
the
for the
first.
duration of the first year, the tuition is frozen, and then for the remainder, the capital fee is gone or something.
Yeah. So you and I might be able to tweak that after, exactly how we want it to look.
Great.
But that would be one thing. I think we should calculate out what the removal of the capital fee brings for us for value and what next year's tuition is. We just want to kind of fact check those numbers as well. But I think those are real numbers, they're concrete, they are what they are. And we do have next year's numbers. And we have a freeze on it, so we know what next year's tuition is. So that's easy enough to calculate out. Yeah. So we should certainly look at that. And we can then create, we know what the differences are from surrounding areas. So I think we want to establish it. I think, those are the concrete things. I think, this community is all, we hear a lot of people go, we don't want to go back to the way it was. Well, without a contract, we've gone back to the way it was. Right? There's no gray area in between.
And even if it's not in the first couple of years, 5 or 10 years down the road, we can't see that far. We could just be back in the same situation, knocking somebody's door looking for.
Begging them to take a student. And we also, we'll just remove the 90% thing, but doesn't create the contract that gets us to where we are. Right. So
I do have a question about, and maybe this is not the right conversation to ask this question, but so obviously I know that like number 4 as drafted here doesn't have a school board recommends approval thing. I don't know if we're adding that, or I think I've read somewhere that unless it is like a monetary, Like
So
if
the-
raising and
There-
appropriating,
There won't be a vote.
there won't be, but then I think there was,
So the MVC voted on
That's fine, they can vote. There's not gonna be anything on the warrant.
it. Okay.
and then, but like, I think number 9, which is not monetary, also has a school board recommends. So I just feel like we should be consistent if it's on the second page.
It does have a school recommends for it.
What is it?
Number 9 is they moved the exiting SBT.
I think I took this from the most recent draft. I don't think I cut it off, maybe I did.
It's on this, there's like another page
Oh,
with
keep
just
going.
that,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So I just like, we should be consistent with the warrant articles if we're not required to put them, then we
So
don't.
let's just run that. That'll be a deanism. I
The
suspect.
final warrant went to him for review, so I will pull that and
Yeah.
make sure.
That's fine,
But yes, that's a good catch, yeah. It needs to be.
So with that, that's updating the information. So if we're talking about the voter guide, I guess that's really kind of, a lot of this is the voter guide, right?
Yeah.
So we make those tweaks and we got them over to Dean. We should probably talk, if we're gonna talk about the voter guide, we should talk about the rest of the articles now.
Yeah. Let's do that. Are there, before we move on, are there any other comments on that note for Article 4? I think if we add too much information, it gets to become too much to read, and people will read everything. We could put some bold in there, or we could put some, like, make some things pop out.
I think, in terms of like withdrawing from the agreement, I think we should include like, for any reason, like there doesn't have to be like, I think, which is what I think it says in the contract.
You can withdraw for any reason, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like there doesn't have to be like, yeah, without cause.
Without cause.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
All right.
How dare you to be my assistant?
So I would say, let's make a couple tweaks to that, Nate, and then put it over to Dean.
Yeah.
All right. Any other tweaks to that little bit of verbiage there? Okay, so if we move, that is regarding.
Okay, wait, I do have another suggestion. So toward the end, or the second half, in the contract, I would say students do not need to apply to Concord. And they will agree to educate 90% of our students. I would
They
do
agree
that.
they will agree to accept all of our students.
Yes.
We are required to send a minimum of
So we want to word that in.
I would emphasize like, we don't need to apply.
The contract students do not need to apply.
All right, we had no notes. Do we typically provide, we don't provide anything budget related for the voter guide, do we, or?
I think there's like so much that we talk about in the work session, I just didn't work on the notes on the budget.
So then we had you had notes regarding the creation of the new fund. We had,
Did you put anything about the budget?
we should put something. We gotta come up with something. Patty says we have to do it, so.
Well, I couldn't see, and then I heard you say you didn't go into it, and I thought, does that mean at all?
The highlights,
There's, I mean, yeah, it's a lot. I know what you're saying, but
I think with the budget, and I don't see it here, but
you could just do the factual. This year, the budget is up
X%.
X amount of dollars. 90% of that is special, whatever, making up numbers, but largely in part due to special education, our operating budget is only up, 1%. It's because of these reasons, transportation.
I have in my truck,
Just
the
little
set of
summary.
notes would probably be very
Yeah.
beneficial.
Space, and we'll do that.
Just highlights so that people know what the budget looks like and why.
All right. As far as the teacher's contract goes, should we editorialize that or should we let them, should we ask it? Would you do that? For the.
Well, if you're gonna address every single warrant article, I would do it fairly for each one.
Okay,
Just mention that we've negotiated a new
all right, so we should come up with something.
for a contract. You can just do highlights.
Yeah, I started to write that and then I just
a
got sort of
very-
buried in a lot of
Yeah,
details. so
Yeah, it's hard to, I'm just, right, and you want people to read it, like you said.
Okay.
It's gotta be like articles, right? It's gotta be quick. It's gotta be,
All right, TikToks.
it's gotta be read on its way to the trash can, right? Because that's basically, it gets exposure from the mailbox to the trash can in probably 50% of the houses.
I mean, some people recycle, some people burn it, you know.
But I know a lot of people who may not necessarily spend a ton of time going through.
Yeah.
Some might, but I can't say all. So do we want to go through these or do we want to like empower a couple of us just to work it up and get it over to Dean for approval? What's the best way to do this?
There's only two more, unless you want to have comments on everything.
It sounds like we probably should. I mean, for Article 8, we should explain that the objective for Article 8 is to pave the upper parking lot. We're working with the town engineer to develop a plan that satisfies the 2014, 15, 2014 warrant article. We'll have to check the dates to make sure. Nothing on the end, but it satisfies the 2014 article to use environmentally sound paving practices. So I mean, yes, we should throw something in there about that. And honestly, I think the bulk of these, you and I can come up with something on that. So do we just want to, does the board just want to give me the green light to write it, send it to Dean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That work? So that kind of kills that. That kind of circles back to the contract thing. Is there anything else that, how do we want to communicate that stuff? As we communicate it, or are we going to use the voter guide? And
There's also these things that we got.
Yeah.
Which I put together as proposals for a social media savvy kind of school at WR.
I don't know who you're talking about. That we are wicked,
Latest.
social media savvy. Do you feel unburdened by the stresses
So I
of
went and did this like this.
social media account management for a K-8 school in Central New Hampshire? Or Southern?
Offloading.
On your, handout with the proposed graphic with the bar graph on it.
Yeah.
The last check mark, that's the only one I would question just because that's a hypothetical. If the status quo didn't, if everyone kept going to Concord.
And I think the other thing you have is anticipate, I think we should just use, I think we should put, Co-Brown's tuition based on a known number. So the most recent number.
And I got that number by adding the percent raise from last year to this year.
So I think I think it should be a factor. It should be based on the 23, 24.
Okay.
23, 24 tuition number, right? You agree with that?
Okay.
And then we know what our tuition rate is gonna be for 24, 25 at Concord. So that number we'll put there, and then we can show Concord's number.
And for like the first one, that says illuminates capital fee.
Yeah.
I think that's, assuming that a lot of people have paid attention to the first contract 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And sort of know what that means and what the impact that is.
So we could
So I would
list,
put a number on.
we could list it.
$500 per student capital fee or whatever.
Yeah, eliminates the $532 per student
Annually.
annual,
Yeah.
per student annual capital fee.
Okay.
So that is, again, that's quantifiable.
And I actually take back that your statement is correct because the tuition to Concord would increase. So taxes are going to, so never mind, I'm fine with that. And then it's Ian's.
Okay. What else do we have for?
Only 4 of these. I was busy.
So the CRTC information, that's more or less, that's their flyer, so I'm not sure anything wrong with that, right? So we can send that to Dean?
I would also think about including the CRTC info in the voter guide. If that's.
Well, and we
part
can
of the
also,
contract.
we have a bunch of information from CRTC that would be another thing to link to, Facebook
Yeah.
Here's a link to the CRTC program pages at Concord High School. This is a program that's offered to all Deerfield students. Or that all Deerfield students have the option, what's the correct term? They have to apply to get into CRTC, but they get first.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we should highlight that. That can be another post.
And when we're talking about a post, am I posting this from my Facebook? Do
We
want
have,
to consider a school board
I was gonna put this
meeting?
on mine and then I don't know, I gotta figure this out. And like, what, repost it on the community page? That how it works these days?
Share
So
it.
Share it.
But I saw another town that I was looking at, they have a Facebook page for their school board.
Right.
we don't, you've always done it.
Man, that's so scary to me.
We have to be careful with that.
I know.
They took down our YouTube, so the school board YouTube from past, it was deemed as not depicting the school board as it was supposed to,
Yeah, so I think that.
so they had to shut that down.
I mean, this is run by their school board and they post.
And if it's informational only, it's just
Yeah,
out there.
you shut comments off, there's no conversation, it's just a place to share.
It's just an outbound kind of
Right.
mechanism. So I mean, I
You
would,
can post agendas to it, and Pembroke is starting one because people feel like people are on Facebook all the time and that may be where they access their information, so.
Yeah, and if they're
you can-
looking, like,
Right.
people might not look for my name. Like, if they're
Right.
searching the town group or something, they might not search
So then
for
how
me
would-
to find it.
Their intention is to just use it for, to like post the minutes, post the agenda, any flyers, any links.
so if a board was to go about it, is it a board member that creates it and just kind of has it as a thing, or is it
I haven't
done?
gotten that far yet.
There's gotta be a
It's gotta
email
be-
connected
right,
to it. The
right,
email is it? What
right,
happens
and
when
that's-
that board member comes off
They're
the
working
board?
with, it would have to be like a special board email setup.
I like that idea.
So we could just do DCS communication.
Josh would have to set up an yeah, like it wouldn't be, the
It would-
email wouldn't be used, he would have to
It
set
would
up
just
an
be-
email
Right, it would
for
just
that
be
account.
DCS board at SAU 53.
And that would just forward to
And then
chair.
That would require his assistance for sure, technology wise, to make sure it's.
So is that a better way for us to handle that kind of outbound communication on Facebook? Let's be honest, it's a tool that everybody uses.
I think it should be, because we don't want, us are so careful about not speaking for the board as individuals, and so I think I don't think it's fair to ask Kendra or Nate to post on their own personal pages when they're speaking or communicating for the board, right? Even though we've authorized them as such, plus your settings and everything have to be public so everyone can see it.
So can you facilitate, if we want to do that, is that something we can, Josh can help facilitate the creation of email address?
I don't know how, if this can happen in like a day.
No, this we
For
have,
this.
no, this isn't like a date. This is like the next couple of weeks if we can figure it out. So that we can complete the conversation maybe at the next meeting.
Yeah, if you could get, all we need is an email address and set up for it.
And then you just have to determine who's the guardian of said outlet.
I'll do it.
It's not me. I hate Facebook.
I mean, I'm happy to.
No response.
I hate Facebook with every bit of my being. Every bit of it.
I mean, I'm happy to, obviously, we would need to share passwords
Right.
in the event of
Yeah.
the
Two
election
people-
outcome, yeah.
Two people should have the password at all times anyway.
So with,
So,
With
well, this is us right now. So let's look into that.
Yeah, and you will have to look at the social media policy too.
Okay, so let's yard that back out for the next meeting. We want to update the bar graph, Nate.
Yeah.
I'd say the CRTC information, I think we can use a lot of their stuff. I don't see anything wrong with that. Let's get that over to Dean to look at. And then we have, which one do you want to go to next? That's one name.
Arrows.
Arrows, okay. That one needs to go to Dean before we would touch it.
Say send it.
To Dean,
I'll send everything to Dean.
okay. And then the last one is the data
From the survey.
from the survey. You know what we should include on this though? Because I've heard we should include the warrant articles and the results in 2015. Because really what we're being asked for is taxpayer funded school choice, right? We have a contract in place for all of our students, or we have taxpayer funded school choice. Because that petition warrant article is not asking for top-off agreements, it's not asking for anything other than fully funding school choice. And that's done with taxpayer dollars. So the taxpayers were pretty clear when we asked them the first time, school choice sounds great. And they've used that graph quite a bit. They were also pretty clear that they want to pay for it. So I think we should, you know, maybe it's another one of these.
Okay.
But I think again, that's factual information. In 2015, we asked the voters these two questions and here are the results.
I like this graphic a lot. When I looked at it on the computer, it was very visible and clear. Did not translate well. And I know that's
In
just
black and
printing,
white.
but,
Yeah, colored graphs don't work well in black and white.
Well, no, it's I don't have glasses. It's very small.
You want to hold it over here?
This is like a very stupid question, but like the clip art and stuff and the art that you're using, I assume is
Yeah,
you've gotten for it in a way that we can actually use it.
yeah, the editing came from Canva. It's at that tide. Is that color tide? That little season?
Yeah.
Is that like protected, I think?
No, that probably not, probably.
Everything else just came from Canva.
Okay,
And I have this.
perfect.
So do we want to, we'll update the first one, send the rest over to Dean and let's get everything, let's create another one with those results from 2015, because that was the largest sample we've seen on any question we've asked you guys in this
Yeah.
matter.
In terms of like the parent and student survey, do we know how many people were surveyed or like what the
We
sample
would
size?
have that data somewhere, right?
Yeah, yeah, I have the number. It was like 60, 70, not a huge number.
Okay,
It was 60 or 70. It was like the same, speaker talking about 200 people who were surveyed, right? It's in the same ballpark.
got it.
60 families, 200 people. So no, none of these are huge data sets.
Sure.
The only big data set we have,
Yeah, that's the biggest data set.
the biggest data set we have is that warrant, those two warrant articles, which we did then, knowing that we were going to be having this conversation at some point in the future.
Yeah, we do have, we had a survey run, we paid UNH to do this. I say we, but this was back in 2008 or 10. Nine, after a couple years into the first contract, and UNH was paid to mail written surveys, collect, call, like harass people, try to get as many responses as they could, and the same results, same questions. That's where I got these questions from.
Oh.
It was basically the same results in the UNH survey.
Wow. Wow.
That was in 2009.
So that was before the renewal of the contract?
That was prior to the extension. I guess.
It also was not a huge sample size.
Yeah.
It was, but it's pretty consistent results.
Do you want to talk about the petition article?
I guess just one question I have when I've read it, and it's come into my head a few times, is that, the petition warrant article says that, the school district will budget for and pay the full tuition for students to attend approved high school of their choice. But where we set our budgets a year before, it's asking us to budget for something that we have no way of actually budgeting for.
Right, it would not take place next year.
I'm just saying in general, let's say that this is next year, right?
So it's
We've got
2
an
years
eighth
from
grade
now.
class and
Are you saying how much would we know?
we have an
what to-
eighth grade
right.
class in January that has,
And how do you budget that in the fall? because it doesn't carry a contract.
I don't even know how we would approach it, honestly.
That's
We have
why,
to
but I
get
think these
guidance
are
on that.
things that we need to flesh out now because, so we've got two issues. We've got an unknown amount of money that would need to be budgeted for.
How do you budget in default?
So you've got a class of 50 kids and 40 want to go to a different school. You know, we're going to carry that extra.
And we have to wrap our budget up in the beginning of December. And either expect 50 kids to tell you where they want to go, have been accepted, have special education. We're figuring out special education costs back in September.
That's a very hard one.
So,
But that's where at Barrington, that's what their trust fund is. They put all their surplus every year into a high school tuition trust.
And I think they budget for the highest number. So I think they just budget for the highest of the three options they have. And I don't know how that carries in default. Like that's a huge question. If it goes up $5,000 a year, you know, a board of trustees could change their tuition to whatever number they deem appropriate. And if they decide, hey, we're gonna build a new addition and it's gonna cost us X amount of money, we're gonna pay for it this year. Everybody owes us an extra $5K. Hands are tied. There's nothing you can do. What makes, and in that, what's an approved high school? What approves a high school? Is that?
Sorry, it's a maybe connected question. And Dean will be here. The deliberative session is going to be exciting again, as always. But is this language as it is even binding, or is it not binding? Did Dean weigh in on that?
No, he does, we just put petition warrants on there as they're submitted. We don't.
Right, but we don't know whether it's it would be an advisory. This kind of language would be an advisory.
No.
He's added that language before.
He's added that as deliberative.
At the end, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like that, I think that would be binding. He didn't question that it would be.
But, I mean, yeah, I just wonder like what would happen if both the contract got approved and this also got voted in? Like,
I've asked
those
that
both
question.
can't
He's
be-
working on that.
Okay, it's like they both can't be binding, right?
And so, let's say we're in the future and we're under this warrant article and we've got an unknown amount of kids. It ends up being 40 kids that want to go around. So we've got 5.
So they want to go to Phillips Exeter because I don't know what makes it an approved high school.
Sure.
You.
So we've got a $200,000 deficit. We're in a default budget because the budget doesn't get approved. We didn't know what to budget for anyways. So now K through 8 is going to take a $200,000 hit.
Because we have to write the check to the high school.
And we stay in default for.
That's why I question this sort of the binding nature of it. That would be. To me, that seems like.
Well, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions on how to apply it. And how many students it applies to. There are questions for sure.
I mean, theoretically, as it's written, if the Concord contract is approved, we could theoretically enter into a contract for up to 10% of our other students at another school. And that would still be fulfilling this warrant article.
And then it would just be a matter of changing the method that you use to reassign your 10%.
Correct.
Go back to a lot of.
I'm just saying, because this doesn't say I guess it says high school of their choice.
Approved high school of their choice.
But what you're saying is we have a contract with Concord that I assume would not allow us to enter into other contracts with other districts. And this one's calling for us to enter into contracts with other districts.
It doesn't, I don't think it says that. I think it just says that we have to send 90% of our students.
So we could you could enter into a contract that says you're going to send 90% of your students, allow a placement of 10% of your students to 500 other schools. The application of it is in the workaround is, I mean, as soon as we got this, we sent it to Dean, we just don't have the results of.
And can this language be modified at deliberative?
Yeah.
The language can?
Petitions can absolutely be modified.
Well, not the intent, right?
The intent for
Well,
this.
right, yeah, I don't, right. Subject to the intent.
I mean, at deliberative, somebody could say advisory, just add the language of advisory only. But that would have to come from the public body.
So I guess the question is that we have questions that you can't answer. Is Dean going to get us these answers,
Who's
or
gonna do that?
are we gonna end up in court?
He will be there, but if you have specific questions, then I would get them to me ahead of time. I mean, Dean, any questions about this, Dean needs to answer them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would definitely wanna know if like, if this is binding and forces us into a breach of contract with Concord, that ends us with us getting sued by Concord and costing the town, I don't know, a lot of money, like, that would probably be good to know.
So we know what we don't know is, I guess, the ultimately what we stand with that one right now.
So details really matter.
Yeah. All right, anything else on that one, Jeff? The other one was solar related, and that's reasonable enough. So that one.
So I'm sending the 4 graphics to Dean. And then when you revise the voter guide, you'll send it to me to send to Dean.
Then we're gonna tweak one of the graphics, just because I
Make a 5th one or tweak it?
we're gonna tweak the first one we talked about.
Oh, yeah,
With
yeah,
the projection number.
Yeah.
We just wanna make it black and white.
yeah. And add a 5th one though, that's gonna show the pie graphs.
I think, I'm sure why not. I don't know what's involved in making that magic. Internet magic. I can fly a plane. I don't know how to do internet magic. Additional questions? None? All right, that brings us to public. We said no non-public, so public comments. Anybody? Hey, Kim, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
I have 2 quick questions. If you can't answer them,
I'm black,
email it.
just so you.
I was gonna get there at the end, do a post interview with Kim Black's meeting house. So I was looking at the Concord contract. I didn't see the language in the warrant article about what percentage it needed to pass by. I thought you had said at the meeting it was
Majority vote.
60% or majority. Okay. I thought I'll have to go back, but the slides might have said 2/3 or 60. So just,
We've already caught it.
okay. And then I was just wondering, the language, it says about having the first term end at 12 years with the option of the 8-year term. Will the town be voting at March to extend that 8-year term?
So it's a 20-year contract. At year 12, the school board has the option. Huh?
Either school.
Either school board, whoever's sitting there on either side has the ability to reopen the contract. But for the first 12 years, it's locked. After year 12, either school board is able to reopen the contract for renegotiation, termination, whatever. And there's some language in there about how that process
I was
goes.
gonna say, it's like technically kind of year 10, because you have to do your notice of intent.
2 years.
Then 2 years,
Yeah.
beforehand.
But we're there for 12 years.
Right,
And
so,
then it can continue up to 20 as the current contract has. The current contract was signed in 04, carries to 24. And that contract was year 10, in 2014. It was looked at, adjusted, and then approved by both boards and stayed in effect. This board has had the ability to reopen that contract with 2 years' notice or exit that contract with 2 years' notice. This board has never exercised. Whoever was sitting at this board at any given time since 2014, some of us have been here for most of it, but some of us haven't, has not exercised that option.
okay. So it's just, there's confusion as to whether or not the town will vote at that 12-year mark or the school boards will essentially.
At
be
the
ones that have
12-year
the
mark,
say.
it would be the ability to end or continue is the school board's decision on either party. Not the town, not the town.
That's all. Thanks,
That's it.
Tim.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay.
Come on up.
Nancy Shute, Pleasant Hill Road. Nate asked about science and why there might have been a increase in it. So Deerfield put a lot of emphasis on making science a priority along with everything else. We had some great mentors, Ellen O'Donnell, Cindy Hansen, and there was a group of us that got to go to science camp for 5 summers. We went for a week and it was sponsored by the state. And we went to workshops during the year. And also we spent a lot of time learning how to incorporate science into everything else we did. So it wasn't that you were just teaching science, because unfortunately, lots of times the emphasis is on math and English, which are important, but science is important too, because you have kids that love science and that's what gets them to learn. When you blow up volcanoes in your classroom and you're talking about why and how, and you incorporate the reading it, you get that non-reader who all of a sudden now wants to know about volcanoes and is pulling out books and reading about it. So I think Deerfield has always done a good job about letting that happen, and I hope that will always continue to happen. The other thing, I totally agree with Jeff. Keep your information to the town, factual about the contract. Co-Brown's an excellent school. Concord's an excellent school. Don't want to play that game because it has already been said that one school is superior to the other. And I do know that some parents have not come forward to voice their support of Concord because they've heard, oh, well, you know, I'm not sending my child to as a superior school. And people may laugh at that, but I sat through many a town meeting, school meeting and town meetings, where we had to go to secret ballots on, to me, what were the simplest questions to vote on, because people were concerned that the teachers may hold that against their child or something. So it is out there. It does happen, and it's really hard. I mean, even when I heard it, well, you know, Co-Brown's superior to Concord, I sent both my kids to Concord. Did I do a disservice to them? And I didn't. So make sure you stick to the facts so that we don't have that out there, because they're both excellent schools. Thanks.
Last one, I promise. I tried to get her to talk. Bobby from Brown Road. I keep hearing like, we only have one option, we only have one contract, but you could have 2 contracts, you could have 3. So you could have as many as you want. You could have multiple contracts and you could negotiate both. You could negotiate more than one. I don't understand why there's a set logic on one school. I agree, different schools are great for different reasons for different kids, and you know that, you've done a million studies. Just to clarify the petition, you choose, so the board, not just you, but the board chooses the offered. I didn't even get to sign it, actually, that petition. I wanted clarification too, because I was like, well, what if they choose Deerfield because cha-ching ching or Phillips, like, you know. So actually and he will back that, he will say that too, but the petition is for a board's chosen schools. It's just to give more options to your.
Unfortunately, that isn't necessarily how it's written.
Okay.
And that's why we have lawyers, because they have to review this and tell us how it's written. But that isn't necessarily how it's written. That may have been the intent, but it isn't how it's written.
And I had the same question, to be honest.
Right.
She did apply. She applied to all of them, millions of them. Also too, coming from it, right, and you're probably gonna have to do this too this year, but you do kind of apply to Concord. I hate to tell you that, but I'd fill out buco forms and you have to pay fees and such. If you want like transportation, you pay multiple fees to Concord. So just like get your facts straight, because I just went through it. Oh yeah, trust me on Concord. I can send you the emails. So that was last year.
Because both my kids went and.
I'll get an answer on that, Bobby, because we just registered my daughter like Monday.
So for transportation, did you have to pay a fee? Or you're
checked with my
driving
wife.
her?
No, I'm gonna check with my wife.
Okay, see, I'm the wife. I fill out all
I'm
the
not my
forms.
wife.
No, I'm saying for her. I'm the mom, like, right? So I do want clarification. I want you to be as blatantly transparent to these people. And when it comes to, I think, I'm not speaking for anybody, but I do see the numbers that, you know, per DCS student, so from K through 8 or pre-K through 8, we budget 19,000+ per student here. So to be like, we budget 19,000+ per kid in this little school, and yet when we send them to high school, we're like, nope, we're gonna cut your budget. Like, you don't need that much. It's just disheartening. So just, yeah, clarification is great. Hopefully this things.
Anybody else? I don't see anybody else. All right, so with that being said, I see, what is it, 8, is it glare on the clock, 8:40? 8:40, look for a motion to adjourn. All in favor? I'm sorry, we have to roll call that. We need a second. Nick gets a second. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Andy?
Aye.
Thank you, folks. Have a good night.